You're all doing it completely terribly wrong." The maid's voice cut through the bunker, and Victor Callahan spun around with his gun already rising. 25 of the world's greatest experts had just failed his impossible vault. The FBI was 60 seconds away. And now the girl who poured his coffee, the one nobody had ever noticed, set down her tray and stepped toward the one machine that could destroy everything he'd built. "Get her out of here," Victor snarled. But then she said 8 more words that froze every man in the room solid because she knew a secret that should have been impossible for anyone alive to know. If you love stories where the person everyone underestimated wins in the end, please subscribe and follow this story all the way to the finish. And comment the name of the city you're watching from right now so I can see just how far this story has traveled tonight. The gun did not lower. Victor Callahan stood in the center of his underground study with sweat crawling down the back of his neck, and for the first time in his 32 years of life, he felt the floor of the world tilting beneath his handmade shoes. He was not a man who felt fear. He had buried men who tried to make him feel it. But the machine in front of him, that monstrous brass and steel object his people called the Leviathan, had done in 90 minutes what no rival, no rat, and no federal agent had ever managed. It had made Victor Callahan afraid. "Talk to me, Henrik," Victor said, and his voice came out low and dangerous. "Tell me you have something." Dr. Henrik Vanderberg did not answer right away. He was 61 years old, a legend in 3 countries, and his hands that had cracked Cold War ciphers and government safes were shaking like leaves in a storm. He pulled back from the vault and wiped his forehead with a silk handkerchief that was already soaked through. "Mr. Callahan," he finally said, "I need you to understand what we are dealing with. I don't want a lecture. I want it open. If I force it," Henrik said, "we all die." The room went quiet. There were 9 men in that bunker, not counting the maid nobody was looking at, and every one of them stopped breathing at the same moment. Victor's 2 enforcers, Marco and Sal, exchanged a glance. The 2 remaining safecrackers backed away from the machine as if it might reach out and grab them. "Explain that," Victor said, slowly. Henrik turned back to the Leviathan. In the low light, it did not look like a safe at all. It looked like the inside of a grandfather clock the size of a doorway, a wall of interlocking gears and rotating brass rings, tiny engraved constellations, and a strange series of what looked like organ pipes running up one side. There was no keypad. There was no dial like a normal safe. There was only this impossible, beautiful, terrifying thing that seemed almost alive. "There is a fail-safe built into the mechanism," Henrik said. "A thermite charge. Do you know what thermite does, Mr. Callahan? It burns at over 2,000 degrees. It cannot be put out. Water feeds it. It melts steel like butter. Whoever built this designed it so that a wrong sequence, a single wrong move triggers the charge. Everything inside turns to ash, and everyone standing this close." He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Victor's jaw tightened. "So don't make a wrong move." "That is the problem," Henrik said, and now his voice cracked. "This is not a lock I can pick. This is not a code I can guess. This is a puzzle designed by someone who understood things I have spent my entire life failing to understand. Astronomy, music, mechanical escapement, the phases of the moon. Whoever built this was not a locksmith, Mr. Callahan. This person was an artist, a ghost, and they built a machine that was meant to be impossible to solve unless you already knew its secret." Victor stared at him. "Then why," he said slowly, "did I pay you $2 million? "Because I told you I would try," Henrik whispered. "I did not tell you I would succeed. No one alive can open this. I am sorry. I am so sorry, but no one can." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Victor lowered the gun, and somehow that was worse. He walked in a slow circle around the room, and his men watched him the way you watch a fire that might spread. Victor Callahan was not a large man. He was lean and sharp, with dark hair combed back and eyes that never seemed to blink at the right times. He had inherited a criminal empire at 26 after his father was gunned down in a restaurant in Little Italy, and against every expectation of every old man in the organization, he had not only kept it alive, he had tripled it. He had built something his father never dreamed of, and it was all about to burn. "Boss," Marco said carefully. "The feds. Our guy on the inside says the raid is happening. Tonight. Could be an hour. Could be 20 minutes. We don't know. I know what the feds are doing, Victor snapped. Everything's in there, Marco went on. The ledgers, the names, every account, every deal we ever made. If they get that vault open, it's not just you. It's all of us. It's 40 years of family. I know what's in the vault, Marco. I put it there. What Victor did not say, what he would never say out loud in front of these men, was the other thing inside the Leviathan. Not the money, not the ledgers. Something else. Something he had been protecting for 6 years without fully understanding why. A single sealed envelope his father had left him with 3 words written on the front in his father's shaking hand. Open when ready. Victor had never been ready, and now he might lose it forever without ever knowing what it said. Cut it open, Victor said suddenly. The room shifted. Boss, Sal said, you heard the doc, the thermite. I heard him. Get the torch. If we can't open it, then nobody opens it. Not me, not the feds, nobody. Better it burns than it talks. Victor. Henrik grabbed his arm, forgetting himself entirely, forgetting who he was touching. You will kill everyone in this room, including yourself. Then everyone should leave, Victor said, and he pulled his arm free. I'll do it myself. That was the moment. That was the exact moment when the impossible happened. You can't cut it open, a voice said. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was a soft, clear voice. A young woman's voice coming from the corner of the room near the base of the stairs. And every man in that bunker turned toward it at once because none of them had even remembered she was there. Emily Carter was 22 years old. She had worked in the Callahan house for 11 months. She was the maid who brought the coffee, who cleaned the crystal, who moved through the mansion like a shadow so quiet that the guards had stopped seeing her within her first week. She wore a plain gray uniform. Her brown hair was pulled back. She had a tray of empty glasses still in her hands because she had come down to collect them minutes ago and then simply stopped staring at the machine, forgotten by everyone. Victor looked at her the way you'd look at a chair that had suddenly spoken. Get out, he said. If you cut it, Emily said, and she did not move. You'll trigger the outer thermal seal before you ever reach the charge. It'll go off the second the metal reaches 400 degrees. Not because of the code, because of the heat itself. He's right about the thermite, but he's wrong about how it triggers. The room went dead silent. Henrik turned around very slowly. What did you say? He whispered. Emily swallowed. She looked terrified. Her hands were trembling around the tray, but she kept talking, and the words that came out of her mouth did not belong to a maid. The Leviathan does not have one fail-safe. It has 3. The thermal seal is the first, the pressure lock is the second, and the third one you'll never even find because it isn't in the mechanism at all. It's in the timing. She looked up at the machine, and something crossed her face that none of them could read. It's a clock. It's always been a clock. You're all trying to break into a safe. But it isn't a safe. It's asking you a question. And none of you know the answer. Marco laughed an ugly, nervous sound. Boss, she's the cleaning girl. She's out of her mind. Let me walk her upstairs. No, said Henrik. Everyone looked at him. The old cryptographer was staring at Emily with an expression of pure naked astonishment. The thermal seal, he said. I have said nothing about a thermal seal. I discovered it 40 minutes ago, and I told no one. Not you, Mr. Callahan, not anyone. It is not written on any document. There is no way for anyone in this room to know about it. He took a step toward her. Girl, how do you know that? Emily did not answer. How do you know that? Henrik said again louder. And Victor, watching all of this, felt something turn over in his chest. He crossed the room in 4 steps and stopped in front of her close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. She was small. She barely came up to his shoulder, and she was shaking so hard the glasses on her tray were clinking together. Put the tray down, Victor said quietly. Emily set it on the floor. Now look at me, he said, and tell me the truth, because I am going to know if you're lying. I always know. How does a maid know the inside of a vault that 25 of the smartest people on the planet couldn't crack? For a long moment, she said nothing. And then her eyes went past him to the machine, to the brass and the gears and the tiny engraved stars, and her chin trembled, and when she spoke again her voice was so quiet he had to lean in to hear it. Because my father built it, she said. The words hit the room like a dropped plate. Your father, Victor repeated. His name was Jonathan Carter, Emily said, and now the tears were coming spilling over, even though her voice stayed steady. He was a horologist, a clockmaker. The best in the world, though almost no one knew it, because he never wanted to be known. When I was a little girl in London, our whole house was covered in blueprints. Gears and stars and music everywhere on every table, pinned to every wall. I used to fall asleep on the floor of his workshop listening to him wind the movements, and this machine, I know every curve of it. I know the sound it makes. I know the way the constellation ring is offset by 3 degrees, because he liked to leave a signature no one would ever notice. She pointed, and her hand was shaking. Look at the ring. 3 degrees. That's him. That's my father. He built this, and then he disappeared. Then, nobody said a word. He disappeared when I was 14. Emily went on, and now the words were tumbling out, 8 years of silence breaking all at once. One night he was there, and the next he was gone, and men came to our house and took his blueprints, and my mother told me he was dead. But he wasn't dead. He couldn't have been dead, because I'm standing in front of something he built after he was supposed to be gone. Do you understand this vault? It's newer than that. He built this after they took him, which means he was alive, which means somebody had him. Henrik made a small sound, almost a moan. Jonathan Carter, he whispered. My God, the stories were real. There was a man, a phantom in our field. We heard rumors of him for years, a builder who worked for people you did not speak the names of. We thought he was a legend. We thought he was a lie we told to scare apprentices. He looked at Emily as if she were a miracle. You are his daughter. I am his daughter, Emily said. Victor Callahan stood very still. And then he did something that made every man in the room tense because they had seen it before, and it never ended well. He smiled. It was a small smile, and it did not reach his eyes. Let me make sure I understand, he said. For 11 months, the daughter of the man who built my vault has been serving me coffee, cleaning my floors, standing 3 feet away from a machine she claims she can open, and she never said a word. His voice dropped. Why now, Emily? Why not 11 months ago? Why not the first week you got here? What's the game? There's no game, Emily said. Everyone has a game. I didn't know it was here, she said, and her voice broke for the first time. I swear to you, I took this job for the money. I didn't even know whose house this was. I cleaned 4 estates in the Hamptons. This was just one of them. I never came down to this floor. I've never been in this room before tonight. I came to get the glasses. And then I looked up and I saw it, and it was like seeing my father's face after 8 years. She wiped her eyes hard with the back of her hand. I don't want anything from you. I don't care about your money or your empire or your FBI. I only care about one thing. If my father built this after he disappeared, then somewhere in the world or somewhere in that vault, there might be something that tells me where he is, or where he was, or what happened to him. That's all I've wanted for 8 years. That's the only reason I'm still standing here instead of running up those stairs. Victor studied her for a long, long moment. Boss, Marco said urgently. We don't have time for a sob story. The feds. Shut up, Marco. But the raid, I said shut up. Victor did not look away from Emily. How long would it take you to open it? Emily looked at the machine. Something changed in her face. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something else was rising. Something that looked almost like hunger. I don't know, she said. I've never done it before. I only watched him work. But I remember. I remember more than I've ever let myself remember. She paused. If the timing lock is what I think it is, then there's a window. It only opens for a few seconds at a time, and it's tied to something. Something specific. A date. A moment. She looked at Victor. But if I'm wrong, we all die. So before I touch it, you need to decide something. Do you trust the cleaning girl, or do you cut it open and hope? The question hung in the air, and in that silence, Victor Callahan felt the entire weight of his life pressing down on him. Everything his father built, everything he had bled for, the names of everyone he had ever protected, the envelope with 3 words on the front. It all came down to this. To a 22-year-old maid with tears on her face and her father's ghost in her hands. Henrik, Victor said, is she right about the thermal seal? Could she be telling the truth? Henrik was still staring at Emily like a man who had seen a saint. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "in 40 years I have never met anyone who understood a mechanism the way she just described this one. Everything she said is correct. Everything. I would stake my life on it." He gave a shaky laugh. "In fact, it appears I'm about to." Victor closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he opened them, and he made the decision that would change everything. "Everyone back," he said. "Against the far wall. Now, except her." The men hesitated. "Move!" Victor roared, and they moved. Only Emily stayed where she was standing before the Leviathan, and Victor stepped back with the others. And for the first time in the entire nightmare of that night, the great machine had someone standing in front of it who was not afraid of it. Or rather, someone who was afraid of it the way you are afraid of a parent, with love underneath. "Wait," Victor said suddenly. Emily turned. "How much time do we have?" Victor asked Marco without looking away from her. Marco checked his phone. His face had gone pale. "The inside guy just texted. Convoy left the field office. If they're coming here and they are boss, we've got maybe a minute, maybe less, 60 seconds. That's it. That's all we've got." 60 seconds. Emily heard the number and something happened to her. The trembling stopped, her breathing slowed, and Victor, watching her, saw the maid disappear entirely, and in her place, standing in a criminal's bunker with a federal raid bearing down on them, was the daughter of a genius stepping into a room she had been walking toward her entire life without knowing it. "Then be quiet," Emily said softly. "All of you. I need to hear it." "Hear what?" Victor asked. "The clock," she said. "It's already ticking. It's been ticking the whole time. My father never built a lock that stayed silent. Somewhere in there it's counting, and I have to count with it." She raised her hands toward the brass and the stars, and she closed her eyes and she listened. For 3 seconds, nothing. And then faintly, so faintly that at first Victor thought he was imagining it, there came a sound from deep inside the Leviathan, a soft, rhythmic ticking. Tick, tick, tick. It had been there all along, buried under the panic and the shouting too quiet for anyone to notice, but she had known to listen for it. She had known. "There you are," Emily whispered to the machine, and something in her voice was so tender that Victor felt the hair rise on his arms. "Hello. I've missed you. Let's see what he taught you." 50 seconds, Marco breathed. Emily's fingers hovered over the first brass ring, the one engraved with tiny stars, the constellation ring that her father had offset by 3 degrees as a signature no one would ever see. And she began very slowly to turn it. The gears inside the Leviathan groaned to life. Every man in the room flinched, waiting for the burst of fire, the thermite, the end. It did not come. The ring turned. The machine accepted it. And a single clear bell-like tone rang out from somewhere inside the vault, a musical note pure and bright hanging in the air of the bunker, like something holy. Emily's eyes were still closed. A tear ran down her cheek. "That's an F sharp," she whispered. "He always started with an F sharp. It was my mother's favorite note." Her voice cracked. "He's talking to me. After 8 years, he's actually talking to me." 40 seconds, Marco said, and his voice was shaking now too, because even a career criminal could feel that something impossible and sacred was happening in that room. "Emily," Victor said, low and urgent, "I need you to keep going. Whatever he's saying to you, you have to keep going. Please." It was the first time in his adult life Victor Callahan had said the word please and meant it. Emily opened her eyes. "The constellation," she said, and now she was speaking fast, the knowledge pouring out of her faster than she could think it. "It's not just decoration. It's a star map. And it's set to a specific date because the position of the stars is different every single night. He locked it to one night out of thousands, and to open the first seal I have to align it to that exact night, the night that mattered most to him." She stared at the map of stars. "But I don't know which night. He never told me. How am I supposed to know which?" She stopped. Her whole body went rigid. "Emily," Victor said. "What is it? What's wrong?" "No," she whispered. "It's not the night that mattered most to him. It's the night that mattered most to me. He'd never lock it to his own memory. He'd lock it to mine, because he knew. He knew that someday I might be the only one who could open it. He built it for me. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. He knew they'd never let him go. He knew he'd never come home, so he left me a door. 30 seconds, Marco said. Which night, Emily? Victor pressed. Think, which night? And Emily Carter, 22 years old. The maid nobody had ever noticed looked up at the stars her father had carved into steel and knew the answer with a certainty that came from somewhere deeper than memory. The last night I ever saw him, she said. The night before he disappeared. He tucked me in and he showed me the sky out my bedroom window and he pointed at the stars and he said, Emily, no matter where I go, if you can find these stars, you can find your way back to me. Her hands were moving now fast and sure, turning the constellation ring, and the gears sang, and the whole machine seemed to lean toward her like a flower toward the sun. March the 9th. I was 14. It was cold. There was Orion right there over the rooftops, and the moon was a thin little crescent, and he kissed my forehead, and he said, Find the stars, Emily. Find the stars and find your way home. The ring locked into place with a deep, resonant clunk. The entire machine shuddered, and every gun in the room came up because it sounded exactly like the beginning of the end. Nobody move, Emily said without turning around. That's the first seal. It's supposed to sound like that. 20 seconds, right? 20 seconds. Marco confirmed, and now he was staring at her with something close to worship. Victor Callahan stood frozen against the far wall, watching a miracle unfold in his basement. And for the first time since he was a boy, since before his father was killed, since before he became the most feared man in New York, he felt something he had spent his whole life burying. He felt hope. There's a second seal, Emily said, and her voice had gone quiet and focused the voice of a surgeon inside the final moments of an operation. The pressure lock. The doctor was right about that one, but it doesn't open with a code. It opens with music. My father encoded a melody into the escapement, a specific melody, and if I play it back note by note in the right order, the pressure equalizes and the second seal releases. She flexed her fingers over a row of tiny brass keys set into the side of the machine keys that looked almost exactly like the keys of a piano, but smaller and older and stranger. But if I play one wrong note, the whole thing locks forever. And then the third fail-safe triggers. And then... She did not finish. How do you know the melody? Henrik asked, breathless. How could you possibly know it? Emily's hand hovered over the keys. Because he used to hum it to me, she said. Every single night. It was my lullaby. He wrote it for me when I was born. He said it was the only song in the world that was truly, completely mine. Tears were streaming freely down her face now, and she was smiling through them, smiling like a woman who had waited 8 years to come home. He hid my own lullaby inside a vault at the center of a criminal empire, and he trusted that one day I'd remember it. He believed in me, even when he was a prisoner, even when he had nothing left. He believed his little girl would find her way back to him. 15 seconds, Marco whispered. Emily closed her eyes one final time, and she began to play. The first note rang out high and sweet, then a second lower, then a third, and as her fingers moved across the tiny brass keys, the most extraordinary sound filled the bunker, a delicate, aching, beautiful melody, a lullaby that a father had written for a daughter. He loved more than his own freedom, hidden inside a machine of steel and secrets, waiting 8 long years for the only person on earth who could ever set it free. The men lowered their guns without realizing they were doing it. Henrik Vanderberg, a hardened cryptographer who had not cried since he was a child, wept openly, and Victor Callahan, the most dangerous man in New York, stood against the wall of his own vault and listened to a stranger play a song he had never heard and felt his entire understanding of the world quietly, completely break apart. Because he had spent his whole life believing that power was the only thing that mattered, that strength was the only currency, that the weak served the strong, and that was simply how the world was built. And now here was a girl in a maid's uniform, a girl he had walked past 100 times without seeing a girl worth less than the coffee she had poured him, doing something he could not do, something Henrik could not do, something 25 of the greatest minds on the planet could not do. And she was doing it not with power. She was doing it with love. The melody climbed toward its final note. Emily's hand hovered over the last key. Her whole life, everything she was, everything she had lost, everything she still hoped to find, hung on a single note suspended in the air of that terrible room. 10 seconds, Marco breathed. And Emily Carter pressed the final key of her father's lullaby. The note rang out clear and true and rose up toward the ceiling and hung there shimmering. And for one endless, agonizing heartbeat, nothing happened at all. Then deep within the Leviathan, something enormous shifted. The note hung in the air, and then it fell silent, and for one terrible second, Emily thought she had failed. Then the Leviathan exhaled. There was no other word for it. A long, low hiss of pressure escaping from somewhere deep inside the machine, a sound like the whole vault letting go of a breath it had held for 8 years. The brass rings shuddered. The organ pipes along the side vibrated, and the second seal, the pressure lock that Henrik had sworn no living person could pass, slid open with a heavy, satisfied groan. Nobody in the room moved. "That's 2, Emily whispered. Her hands were still trembling over the little brass keys. 2 down. 8 seconds, Marco said, and his voice cracked on the number. "I know," Emily said. "I heard you." "There's still a third one," Henrik breathed. "You said 3 fail-safes. You said the third one wasn't even in the machine." "It isn't." Emily didn't turn around. Her eyes were locked on the center of the Leviathan, where a small circular panel had begun very slowly to rotate on its own. "The third one is the timing, and the timing just started. The second the pressure lock released, it began counting down. If I don't finish before it reaches 0, everything reseals and the thermite arms itself, and then nobody, not me, not anyone opens this vault ever again." She swallowed hard. "It becomes a coffin. Forever." "How long?" Victor asked. He had stepped away from the wall without realizing it. He was standing 3 feet behind her now, close enough to see the sweat on the back of her neck, close enough to see how badly her hands were shaking. "How long until it reseals?" "I don't know," Emily said. "He never told me that part, but it'll be short. He'd have made it short, long enough for the right person to finish and not 1 second longer for the wrong person to get lucky." She flexed her fingers. "So please, everyone, stop talking. I have to feel it now." And she reached into the open second seal up to her wrist, into a machine that could burn her to ash in a heartbeat, and every man in the room stopped breathing. Victor watched her arm disappear into the Leviathan and felt his own heart slam against his ribs. Because here was the thing that Victor Callahan could not stop thinking even now, even with the feds bearing down and his empire hanging by a thread. This girl, this Maid. She had been in his house for 11 months. She had poured his coffee. She had cleaned the blood off his study floor twice and never asked a question, never flinched, never said a word. He had looked at her 100 times and seen nothing. A gray uniform, a quiet face, furniture. And all that time she had been the only person on earth who could do the one thing that would save everything he had. He had spent his whole life learning to read people, to find the angle, the weakness, the lie. And he had looked straight through the single most important person in his life and seen nothing at all. 6 seconds, Marco whispered. Emily's face changed. "There's something in here," she said. "A wheel, a small one, toothed. He used to call it the heart wheel." Her arm shifted deeper. "It has to turn 1 full rotation, but it fights you. It's spring-loaded against the direction it needs to go, so your instinct is to force it, and the second you force it, the thermite arms. You can't force it. You have to guide it. You have to let it want to turn." Her voice dropped so low it was almost nothing. "You have to love it into opening." "That's insane," Sal muttered from across the room. "That's completely insane." "He was a little insane," Emily said, and she almost laughed a broken, tearful sound. "Everyone brilliant is. Now be quiet. I mean it." She closed her eyes, and in the silence of that bunker with a federal convoy screaming through the dark toward the Callahan estate, with $1 billion and 40 years of blood, and 1 sealed envelope with 3 words on the front, all hanging on the fingertips of a 22-year-old maid, Emily Carter began so gently that her whole body seemed to still to turn the heart wheel of her father's vault. Tick. 1 tooth. Tick. 2. 4 seconds. Marco breathed. Tick. Tick. It's fighting me, Emily whispered. It doesn't know me yet. Come on, please. I'm his daughter. I'm Emily, you know me, you've always known me. Tick. 3 seconds. Come on. Emily begged the machine, and tears were pouring down her face now, and her whole arm was trembling with the strain of not forcing it, of holding back, of being gentle, when every instinct in her body screamed to just twist it and pray. Come on, Daddy. Let me in. Let me in. Please let me in. Tick. 2 seconds. Tick. And then the heart wheel all at once, as if something inside it had finally recognized the hand that turned it, spun free. The Leviathan opened. There was no explosion. There was no fire. There was only a deep, resonant final sound, a sound like a cathedral bell rung once at midnight, and the entire front face of the great machine, all the brass and the stars and the organ pipes, swung slowly, majestically outward on hidden hinges, revealing the darkness inside. Emily fell backward. She would have hit the floor if Victor hadn't caught her. He didn't decide to catch her. His arms simply moved on their own, and suddenly he was holding the maid who had just saved his life, and she was shaking against him, sobbing, drained of everything, and he was staring over her shoulder into the open heart of a vault that no one had believed could ever be opened. You did it, Victor said. His voice didn't sound like his own. You actually did it. He did it, Emily whispered. I just remembered. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 9 hardened criminals and 1 legendary cryptographer stood in stunned silence, looking at the impossible thing that had just happened in front of them. And the only sound in the entire bunker was Emily Carter crying softly against the chest of the most feared man in New York. Then Marco looked at his phone, and the blood drained out of his face. Boss, he said, the convoy. It just turned off the highway. They're on the estate road. They're 2 minutes out, maybe less. And just like that, the spell shattered. Victor let go of Emily gently but fast and turned into someone else entirely, the boss again, the machine again, snapping orders like gunfire. Everybody works. Now, Marco, Sal, get the ledgers, all of them into the cases. Henrik, the account books, the black ones, they go first. Move, move, move. He was already reaching into the open vault, pulling out stacks of documents, and his hands were fast and sure. We've got 90 seconds to empty this thing and get it upstairs before the feds are through the front gate. The room exploded into motion. Men grabbed cases. Documents flew. The vault that had held its secrets for 8 years was being gutted in a frenzy of panic and greed, and Emily just stood there. She stood in the center of the chaos, still shaking, and watched them tear apart the machine her father had built. And something in her chest was cracking wide open. Because she had done what she came to do. She had opened it. And now in the noise and the rush, she was searching every stack of paper that flew past her for the only thing she actually wanted. Not money, not ledgers, a word, a name, a location. Anything at all that might tell her where her father was, or where he had been, or whether he was still alive somewhere in the world waiting. Wait, she said. Nobody heard her. Wait, please, I need to look for— There's no time, Victor said without looking up. You promised, Emily said, and her voice rose sharp and desperate, cutting through the noise. You promised. I opened it. I did what you asked. You said if there was anything about my father— I never said that, Victor snapped. And he was right. He hadn't. Emily had told him what she wanted, and he had never once agreed to it. She had just assumed because she was drowning, and she needed something to hold on to, that a man like Victor Callahan might have a shred of honor in him. She had assumed wrong. The realization hit her like a slap. You used me, she whispered. I saved you, Victor said, still tearing documents out of the vault. You were in a room full of men with guns and a machine that was about to burn us all alive. I could have shot you the second you opened your mouth. I didn't. Now step back and let me work, and when this is over, we'll talk about your father. When this is over, Emily repeated. When this is over, you'll be gone. You'll take everything and disappear, and I'll never see any of it again. This is my only chance. This is the only chance I've had in 8 years. She lunged forward and grabbed a stack of documents out of a case, and Marco caught her wrist hard enough to bruise. Boss, Marco said, holding her, what do you want me to do with her? Victor turned. And for one long, terrible moment, Emily saw exactly who Victor Callahan really was. She saw the calculation move behind his eyes, cold and fast, the same calculation he must have made 100 times before deciding whether a person lived or died. She had just saved his entire empire, and he was standing there in front of God and his men deciding whether she was worth keeping alive. "Let her go," Victor said finally. Marco blinked. "Boss, I said let her go." Victor's voice was flat. "She opened the vault. She earned that much." He looked at Emily, and something flickered across his face that she couldn't read, something that almost looked like shame, and then it was gone. "But we're leaving. Right now. All of us. And you're coming with us, Emily, because in about 60 seconds, this house is going to be full of federal agents, and if they find the maid standing next to an empty vault, they will put you in a room, and they will not let you out for a very, very long time. Do you understand? I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm telling you that right now, whether you like it or not, I am the only thing standing between you and a federal prison cell." Emily stared at him. "Marco the Far case," Victor said. "Bring it, all of it. We go out through the tunnel." He grabbed the last stack of documents from the vault, and as he did, something small slid out from between the pages and fell to the floor. An envelope, yellowed, old, with 3 words written on the front in a shaking hand. Victor froze. Everything else in the room kept moving, the panic, the cases, the countdown. But Victor Callahan stood absolutely still, staring down at the envelope on the floor, and Emily, watching him, saw the boss vanish and something much younger and much more broken flicker to life underneath. He bent down and picked it up, open when ready, his father's handwriting. "Boss," Marco said. "Boss, we gotta go, they're at the gate." "I know," Victor said, but he didn't move. He was staring at the envelope like a man staring at a ghost. 6 years. He had put this envelope in the vault 6 years ago, the day he took over the family, and he had told himself he'd open it when he was ready, and he had never been ready, and now here it was in his hand, and the world was ending around him. "Victor." It was Emily. She had stopped fighting. She was watching his face. "What is that?" "Nothing," Victor said. He shoved it inside his jacket. "We're leaving." 30 seconds, Marco said, and now they could all hear it, the distant crunch of tires on gravel, the low growl of engines' headlights sweeping across the high windows of the mansion far above them. The FBI had arrived. "Tunnel. Now." Victor grabbed Emily's arm, not roughly but firmly, and pulled her toward a section of the bunker wall that Henrik had assumed was solid stone. Victor pressed something, and a panel slid aside, revealing a dark passage running away into blackness. "Everyone in. Henrik, you too. You've seen too much to leave behind." He shoved the old cryptographer forward. "Marco, seal the vault behind us. I want them to find it closed. Let them wonder how empty it is. They'll never get it open," Henrik said, almost laughing as he stumbled into the tunnel. "It'll take them years. It took a miracle to open it once." "Then let's hope the miracle stays on our side," Victor said, and he pushed Emily into the darkness ahead of him. The last thing Emily saw before the panel slid shut and swallowed the light was the open face of her father's vault, the brass and the stars, and the little keys she had played her lullaby on, standing empty in the center of the room, waiting to be closed again on all its secrets. And then the darkness took her, and she was running. They ran through the tunnel in the pitch black, and Emily's mind was spinning. She had done the impossible, and it had gotten her nothing but a hand around her arm and a run through the dark toward a future she couldn't see. Everything she had hoped for, every dream of finding her father, had been ripped out of the vault and stuffed into cases carried by men who would burn her father's secrets the second they became inconvenient. "Victor!" she gasped, running. "The documents, my father, there has to be something in there about him. You have to let me look. You have to." "When we're safe," Victor said behind her. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." The tunnel curved and climbed, and then suddenly there was cold night air on Emily's face, and they burst out through a hidden door into a cluster of trees behind the estate, and there were cars waiting, black SUVs with their engines running, and men she didn't recognize opening doors. "In," Victor said, pushing her toward the nearest car. "You ride with me." "I don't want to ride with you." "I don't care." He put her in the back seat and climbed in beside her, and Marco took the front and the SUV pulled away into the dark, just as behind them the whole Callahan estate lit up red and blue sirens screaming floodlights, blazing a small army of federal agents pouring through the front gates of a mansion that was already empty. They had made it out with 15 seconds to spare. For a long time, nobody spoke. The SUV wound through the back roads of the Hamptons, away from the lights, away from the sirens, and Emily sat pressed against the door as far from Victor as she could get, staring out the window, shaking, trying to understand how the best moment of her life had turned into this in the space of 2 minutes. Then Victor said quietly, "You want to know something?" Emily didn't answer. "In 11 years of running this family," Victor said, "I have never once seen anything like what you did in that room. Not once. I've hired the best. I've paid millions. 25 of them, Emily. 25 of the smartest, most expensive people in the world, and they all told me it couldn't be done. And then a girl who makes my coffee walked up to it and opened it with a lullaby." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't understand it. I've been sitting here trying to understand it, and I can't." "There's nothing to understand," Emily said, still staring out the window. "It wasn't smart. It wasn't clever. It was just love. My father loved me, so he built me a door. And I loved him, so I remembered the key. That's all. That's the whole secret. And it's a thing you'll never understand, because you don't love anything, and nothing loves you." The words landed harder than she expected. Victor said nothing for a long moment. "You're probably right," he said finally, and something in his voice made her turn and look at him. He was holding the envelope. He had taken it out of his jacket, and he was turning it over and over in his hands, and in the passing light of the street lamps, Emily could see his face, and it was not the face of a mafia boss. It was the face of a lost boy. "My father gave me this 6 years ago," Victor said, not quite to her, not quite to himself. "The day before he was killed. He put it in my hand, and he said, 'Don't open it until you're ready.' And I asked him ready for what, and he said, 'You'll know.'" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "I've carried it into that vault 100 times, telling myself today was the day. And I never opened it. 6 years. I've killed men, Emily. I've buried people. I've done things that would make you sick, and I've never once been brave enough to open a letter from my own father." Emily looked at him, and despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the betrayal, something in her chest softened just a little because she knew exactly what that felt like. To have a father who vanished, to be left holding something you couldn't bring yourself to open. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "I don't know," Victor said. "Maybe because you're the only person I've ever met who might understand it." He looked at her. "Your father built a machine and hid a message inside it for you. Mine wrote 3 words on an envelope and never explained them. And we both spent years being too scared to open them." He turned the envelope over one more time. "I watched you open that vault tonight, and I thought if she can do that, if a girl in a maid's uniform can walk up to the impossible thing and just open it, then maybe." He stopped. "Then maybe what?" Emily said. Victor didn't answer. Instead, slowly, with hands that were not quite steady, the most dangerous man in New York slid his finger under the flap of the envelope his father had left him and tore it open. Emily watched him unfold a single sheet of paper. She watched his eyes move across it, and she watched Victor Callahan's face fall apart. It happened all at once. The cold mask, the boss, the machine, the man who never let anyone see anything, all of it collapsed in the space of a single breath. His hand started to shake. The color drained out of his face. His mouth opened and no sound came out. "Victor," Emily said, "what is it? What does it say?" He didn't answer. "Victor." "It's not possible," he whispered. "What's not possible?" He looked up at her, and his eyes were wet, and there was something in them she had never expected to see in a man like him. Fear. Real deep childlike fear. "My father," Victor said. "In this letter. He's telling me that he didn't build his fortune alone, that there was always someone above him, someone he answered to, someone who owned him." Victor's voice was shaking. "A partner he never talked about, a man he was terrified of. He's telling me that if I'm reading this, it means he's dead, And it means I need to be careful because the man who really controlled everything, the man behind the whole empire, is still out there, and he will come for me the same way he came for my father." Victor swallowed. "There's a name." "What name?" Emily said, and something cold was crawling up her spine, some instinct she couldn't yet explain. Victor looked back down at the letter. "Falcone," he said. "The name is Falcone." Marco in the front seat went rigid. "Boss," he said slowly, "Falcone's a myth. That's a boogeyman name. Guys use it to scare each other. There's no Falcone." "My father seemed to think there was," Victor said quietly. "My father seemed to be terrified of it." He kept reading, and his frown deepened. "He says Falcone doesn't run one family. He runs all of them. From behind. He says the war between the families, all of it, the killings, the betrayals, it was never really the families fighting each other. It was Falcone playing them against each other, keeping everyone at each other's throats so nobody would ever look up and see who was really holding the strings." Victor's voice dropped. "He says the vault, the Leviathan, wasn't built to protect our money. It was built to protect the evidence, proof of who Falcone really is. My father was collecting it for years in secret, hiding it inside the one thing Falcone could never open." The car went silent, and then Emily said very slowly in a voice that didn't sound like her own, "Victor, read me that part again, the part about who built the vault." Victor looked at her. "My father didn't build the vault," he said. "We hired someone, a specialist, a ghost. Nobody ever knew his real name. He came, he built the Leviathan, and then he—" Victor stopped. The blood drained from his face for the second time in 5 minutes. Then he disappeared. Emily couldn't breathe. "He disappeared," she repeated. "Emily, say it again." "The man who built the vault for my father," Victor said, and now his voice was barely a whisper, was taken. "Afterward, my father says in this letter that he never forgave himself for it, that the builder didn't want to do it, that he only did it to protect his family, and that when it was done, Falcone took him. My father tried to find him. He couldn't. He wrote here that the builder had a daughter, a little girl in London, and that he always meant to make it right to find her, to tell her the truth about what happened to her father." Victor looked up, and his eyes were huge. "Emily, your father didn't just build a vault for the Callahan family. He built the vault that holds the proof of who Falcone is, and Falcone took him for it." The world tilted. Everything Emily had believed for 8 years, every story her mother had told her, every theory she had turned over in her mind 10,000 times, cracked and fell away. And underneath it was something so much larger and darker than she had ever imagined. "My father is alive," she whispered. "Emily, I don't know that." "He's alive!" She grabbed Victor's arm. "Don't you see, if Falcone took him because he could build the impossible, then Falcone wouldn't kill him. You don't kill the only man on earth who can build what you need. You keep him. You lock him up and you make him work. My father has been building things for Falcone for 8 years. That's why the vault was newer than when he disappeared. He's alive, Victor. My father is alive, and Falcone has him, and the proof of who Falcone is has been sitting inside those documents in the trunk of this car the entire time." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The SUV drove on through the dark, and then slowly Victor Callahan began to understand the full shape of what had happened tonight. And it was so much bigger than a vault, so much bigger than an empire that it took his breath away. He had thought this night was about surviving an FBI raid. He had thought it was about saving his money and his family and his own skin. It wasn't. It never had been. Tonight, without knowing it, he had opened a door that led straight into the heart of the war that had killed his father, the war that had killed a dozen bosses before him, the war that no one even knew was a war, because they had all been too busy fighting each other to see the man pulling the strings. And the only reason any of it had happened, the only reason the door had opened at all, was sitting right next to him in a maid's uniform, with her father's ghost in her hands, and her father's proof of Falcone's guilt in his trunk. "Emily," Victor said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully." "I'm listening." "The men who work for me," Victor said quietly, "the ones in this car and the one behind us, I don't know all of them anymore. After tonight, after what my father wrote, I don't know who I can trust. If Falcone runs everything from behind, then Falcone has people inside my family. He might have had them for years. Some of the men I'd trust with my life might be his. And the moment they realize what's in those documents, the moment they realize you're the daughter of the man who can identify Falcone. Victor's jaw tightened. You're not safe. Not with the feds, not with me, not with anyone. From the second you walked up to that vault tonight, you became the most dangerous person alive to the most powerful man alive. And he doesn't know you exist. Yet. Emily's heart was pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying, Victor said, that an hour ago you were nobody. A maid. Invisible. And that was the safest thing you could possibly be. And now you're the girl who opened the Leviathan, and the daughter of the ghost who built it, and the only person who might be able to lead us to the one man who can bring down Falcone. He looked at her, and there was something new in his eyes now. Something that wasn't calculation, and wasn't cruelty. I used you tonight. You were right about that. I'm not going to pretend I didn't, but I'm telling you the truth right now, and I need you to hear it. You cannot go home. You cannot go back to your old life. The second Falcone learns what happened in that bunker tonight, and he will learn he always learns he is going to come looking for the girl who opened the impossible vault. And when he finds you, he is going to realize whose daughter you are. And then he is going to use you to make your father do whatever he wants, or he's going to kill you both. The car went very quiet. Emily stared out the window at the dark trees rushing past, and she thought about the last night she had ever seen her father, the crescent moon, and Orion over the London rooftops, his voice in her ear. Find the stars, Emily. Find your way home. Then I don't have a choice, she said finally. Emily, you don't understand. She turned to him and her eyes were burning, and the fear was still there, but underneath it now was something harder, something that had been waiting 8 years to have a direction to point itself in. My whole life I've had nothing to fight. My father vanished and there was no one to blame, nothing to do, nowhere to go. Just an empty space where he used to be, and me cleaning other people's houses, waiting for a miracle that was never going to come. And now you're telling me there's a man, a real man, with a name, Falcone. And he took my father, and he still has him, and everything I need to find him is sitting in the back of this car. Her voice didn't shake at all now. You think you're warning me. You think you're scaring me. But you just gave me the one thing I've wanted for 8 years, a way home. She held his gaze. I'm not running from Falcone, Victor. I'm going to find him. And you're going to help me. Because that proof in your trunk is the only thing that can save your empire and bring down the man who killed your father. We want the same thing. We just found out we've always wanted the same thing. Victor Callahan looked at her for a long, long time. And then slowly the most dangerous man in New York did something none of his men had ever seen him do. Something Emily would not have believed possible an hour ago. He smiled. A real smile. Small and tired. And almost human. You know, he said, when you walked up to that vault tonight, I thought you were the most reckless person I'd ever seen in my life. Now I'm starting to think you might be the bravest. I'm not brave, Emily said. I'm just done waiting. Marco cleared his throat from the front seat. Boss, he said carefully, I don't want to interrupt whatever this is, but there's a problem, a big one. What? Victor said. That second car, the one behind us with Sal and the documents. Marco's eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror and his voice had gone flat and strange. It's not behind us anymore. Victor spun around in his seat and looked out the back window. The road behind them was empty. When did it drop off? Victor demanded. Marco, when... I don't know. A few minutes ago. I thought maybe they took the other fork. Maybe they were being careful splitting up in case of a tail. Marco's knuckles were white on the wheel. Boss, Sal has the documents. All of them. The proof. The Falcone evidence. Everything we pulled out of that vault. It's all in his trunk. The silence in the car was absolute, and Emily, watching Victor's face go slowly white, understood with a sick and dawning horror exactly what it meant. Someone got to him, Victor said quietly. Someone in my own family. Tonight. The second we came out of that tunnel. He closed his eyes. Falcone already knows. He knew before we even got out of the house. He has someone inside close enough to peel off the car carrying the one thing that could destroy him, and I didn't even see it happen." His hand closed into a fist. "The documents are gone. Your father's proof. 8 years of evidence. Gone. And whoever took it works for me, and I don't know who they are." Emily's whole body went cold. "Then it's already started," she whispered. Victor turned his phone over in his hand, and the screen lit up his face, and Emily watched the last of the boy disappear and the boss come back harder and colder and more dangerous than she had ever seen him, because now it wasn't just about surviving anymore. Now it was war. "Marco," Victor said in a voice like a closing door, "turn the car around. We're going to find Sal. And when we find him—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. And as the SUV swung hard across the empty road and its headlights cut back into the darkness they had come from Emily, Carter gripped the seat and stared into the night, and somewhere out there in the dark she knew was a man named Falcone who had stolen her father and who now held the only proof of his own guilt and who did not yet know that the daughter of the ghost was coming for him. The SUV tore back the way it had come, and Victor was already dialing phone pressed hard against his ear, and Emily could hear it ringing and ringing and ringing into nothing. "Sal's not picking up," Victor said. "Marco, call him." "I've been calling him, straight to voicemail. Same with the driver, same with Tommy." Marco's voice was tight. "Boss, nobody in that car is answering. Nobody." "Then they're dead or they're bought," Victor said. "There's no third option." Emily gripped the door handle as the car swung around a curve. How far behind did they drop off? 2 miles, maybe 3. Marco was watching the road like a hawk. "There's a service road that breaks off the estate route about a mile back. Old delivery road, barely anyone knows it's there. If someone wanted to peel a car off quiet, that's where they'd do it." "Then that's where we go," Victor said. For a moment, nobody spoke, and in that silence, Emily's mind was racing because something didn't add up, and she couldn't stop the thought once it started. "Victor," she said slowly, "how did they know?" "Know what?" "Which car had the documents?" She turned to face him. "There were 2 cars. We came out of that tunnel and split into 2 cars. Somebody knew which one Sal got into. Somebody knew the documents went with him and not with us. That's not luck. That's not a guess." Her voice dropped. "Somebody in that tunnel with us told them. Somebody who was standing right next to us when we loaded the cases." Victor went very still. Because she was right, and he knew she was right, and the list of people who had been in that tunnel was very short. Marco, Sal, Henrik, himself, Emily, and the 2 drivers who had been waiting with the cars. "Henrik," Victor said quietly. "He was in our car," Emily said. "He came with us." "The drivers, then." "Or Marco," Emily said. The car swerved. "Watch it," Victor snapped, but his eyes had moved to the back of Marco's head, and Emily saw it happen, saw the poison of the thought take root, because that was what a man like Falcone did. That was the whole genius of it. He didn't have to be in the room. He just had to plant one seed of doubt, and it would grow on its own, and it would turn allies into enemies without Falcone ever lifting a finger. "Boss." Marco's voice had changed. He'd heard it. Of course he'd heard it. "Don't you do that. Don't you look at me like that. 12 years. 12 years I've bled for your family. I took a bullet for your father in front of that restaurant. I've got the scar. You want to see the scar? Keep your eyes on the road, Marco. You think I'd sell you out to Falcone? A name I never even heard until 10 minutes ago." Marco's hands were shaking on the wheel now, and Emily couldn't tell if it was rage or fear or both. "I don't even know who that is. None of us do. You think I'm smart enough to run some secret double game for a boogeyman I can barely work my own phone, boss, you know that." And that strangely was what made Victor believe him. Because it was true. Marco was loyal and brave and about as subtle as a brick through a window, and the kind of person who could peel a car off a convoy and vanish into the night without a trace was not Marco. It was someone quiet, someone careful, someone who watched everything and said nothing. Emily felt the blood drain out of her face, because she knew exactly what that sounded like. It sounded like her. Quiet, careful, invisible. Watching everything and saying nothing for 11 months. And she watched the same thought arrive in Victor's eyes, watched him turn and look at her. And she understood in an instant that the seed of doubt Falcone had planted was about to grow in the worst possible direction. "No," Emily said. "I didn't say anything," Victor said. "You're thinking it. I can see you thinking it. You're thinking the maid who was invisible for 11 months, the maid who knew things she shouldn't, the maid who showed up at exactly the right moment to open the one vault Falcone couldn't crack." Her voice was rising. "You're thinking maybe I'm his, maybe I was planted, maybe I've been in your house for 11 months waiting for the night the vault came out." Victor said nothing, and his silence was an answer. "Think about it, Victor," Emily said, and she was pleading now, fast, desperate. "If I worked for Falcone, why would I open the vault at all? He already had a way in. He had someone in your family, someone who peeled off that car. He didn't need me. If I were his, the smartest thing I could ever do would be to stand in that corner and stay invisible and let you cut the vault open and burn everything, including the proof against him. That's what Falcone would want. The proof gone forever. Instead, I stepped forward. I risked my life. I saved the one thing that can destroy him." Her chest was heaving. "I didn't save your empire tonight, Victor. I saved the evidence that Falcone has spent 8 years trying to bury. I am the last person on Earth who works for him. I'm the only one who wants him found as badly as you do." The car was silent, except for the engine. And then Victor let out a long, slow breath, and the suspicion drained out of his face, and he nodded once. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, you're right. I'm sorry." He rubbed his face with both hands. "This is what he does, isn't it? This is exactly what he does. He doesn't need to send an army. He just needs to make me look at the people next to me and wonder. And I'm doing it. 10 minutes into learning his name, and I'm already tearing my own family apart in my head." He laughed, a hollow, exhausted sound. "He's been doing this to my family for 40 years, and we never even knew there was someone doing it." "There it is," Marco said suddenly. Up ahead, the service road broke off from the main route, a narrow, dark strip vanishing into the trees, and Marco slowed the SUV and killed the headlights and turned onto it, and they crawled forward in the dark. "Slow," Victor murmured. "Slow." And then they saw it. The second SUV was sitting at an angle across the service road, one door hanging open, its headlights still burning weakly into the trees. It wasn't moving. Nothing was moving. "Stop the car," Victor said. Marco stopped. For a moment, none of them breathed. "Stay here," Victor told Emily. "No. Emily, if Sal's hurt, someone needs to help him, and I'm the only one here who's ever done a day of actual work with their hands," Emily said, already opening her door. "You 3 point guns at things. I know how to move a body and check if it's breathing. Which one of us do you want getting out of this car?" Victor stared at her, and then incredibly he almost smiled again. "You're going to be a problem," he said. "I've been told." They moved toward the abandoned car together, low and careful Marco, with his gun up, Victor with his Emily between them. And as they got closer, the smell hit them first, and then the sight, and Emily's stomach turned over. Sal was in the driver's seat. He wasn't moving. There was blood dark and wide across the whole front of him, and his eyes were open and fixed on nothing, and he was gone. The driver in the passenger seat was gone too, and the trunk of the car was standing wide open, empty. "The documents," Victor breathed. "They took the documents." Emily forced herself to look away from Sal's face, forced herself to think, forced her hands to stop shaking. "Victor, look at Sal. Look at how he's sitting." "Emily, he's dead, I can see that." "No, look, his seatbelt's still on. His hands are still near the wheel." She swallowed hard. "He never fought. He never even reached for his gun. Whoever did this, Sal let them walk right up to the window. He rolled his window down for them, Victor. You don't roll your window down for a stranger on a dark road at midnight. You roll it down for someone you know, someone you trust, someone in the family." Victor closed his eyes. "It's one of mine," he said. "It's someone Sal trusted enough to stop for. Someone who could walk up to that window and put Sal at ease long enough to—" He didn't finish. "It's one of my own men. Right now, tonight, one of my own people is driving away with the only proof that Falcone exists, and I shook that man's hand this week." I ate dinner with him. I would have died for him." His voice cracked. "How long, Emily? How long has he been theirs? A year, 5 since before my father died." "I don't know," Emily said softly. "My father knew." Victor's eyes came open and they were burning now. That's what the letter meant. Be careful. He knew there were people close to me who weren't mine. He tried to warn me, and I was too much of a coward to open the envelope and read it. If I'd opened it 6 years ago. His hand closed into a fist. 6 years, Emily. I could have known for 6 years. Emily reached out without thinking and put her hand on his arm. "You didn't know," she said. "Neither did I. My mother told me my father was dead. I believed her for 8 years. We both got lied to by people we loved, and we both spent years too scared to look the truth in the face. But we're looking now, Victor. Both of us. Tonight. That has to count for something." For a moment, Victor just looked at her hand on his arm. This small hand that had opened the impossible, and then he covered it with his own briefly, and Emily felt the loneliness in it, the sheer bottomless loneliness of a man who had just discovered he could trust no one on earth except a maid he'd known for 11 months. "Boss," Marco said quietly from a few feet away. He was crouched by the open trunk. "You need to see this." They came over. There was a single sheet of paper lying in the empty trunk, placed there deliberately squared to the edges. It hadn't fallen. It had been left. And on it, in clean printed letters, were 4 words. Emily read them, and her blood turned to ice. "She belongs to me." Nobody spoke. "He knows," Emily whispered. "Falcone, he already knows about me. He knows I opened the vault. He knows I'm the daughter. He left this here tonight an hour after it happened. He knows everything already." She backed away from the trunk. How does he know already? We haven't told anyone. The only people who know I'm Jonathan Carter's daughter are in that bunker or in this car." Victor's face had gone gray, because there was only one answer, and it was the same answer as before, only worse now, so much worse. Someone who had been in that bunker when Emily confessed who her father was. Someone who had heard every word. Someone who had gotten the message to Falcone within the hour and killed Sal and taken the documents and left this note. And Victor ran the list again in his mind, the short, terrible list of who had been standing in that room when Emily said the words, "My father built it." And this time the answer landed on someone he had not suspected at all. Someone he had brought along specifically because he'd seen too much to leave behind. Someone sitting right now, safe and sound in the estate somewhere or wherever Victor's men had stashed him. Someone Victor had personally saved. "Henrik," Victor said. Emily went cold. "Henrik was in our car. He couldn't have—" "He was in our car until we came out of the tunnel," Victor said slowly. "And then, in the chaos of loading up, do you remember where he went? Do you actually remember seeing him get into our SUV?" He was breathing faster now. "I told Marco to put him in with us. I gave the order." But it was chaos, Emily. Cases, flying men shouting the feds 30 seconds out. Did anyone actually watch which car Henrik got into? Silence. "Marco," Victor said. "Where is Henrik right now?" Marco's face changed. He fumbled for his phone. The other cars were supposed to take him to the safe house on Dune Road. Let me call and confirm he made it. He dialed. He waited. His face got worse. "They're saying—" He looked up slowly. "Boss, the guys at the safe house say Henrik never showed up. They've been waiting. He's not there. He was never in any of the cars that went to Dune Road." "He never got in a car," Emily whispered. "He walked away," Victor said. "In the chaos right after we came out of the tunnel while we were loading up. And I was distracted by that envelope. Henrik Vanderberg walked into the trees and made a phone call." His voice was deadly quiet now. "The cryptographer. The one I paid $2 million. The one who told me the vault could never be opened. The one who confirmed every fear, who made me want to cut it open and burn everything." Victor's hands were shaking with rage now. "He wasn't there to open the vault, Emily. He was there to make sure nobody else could. He was there to make sure I destroyed it. He works for Falcone. He's probably worked for Falcone for years. And I brought him into my own home and handed him the keys to everything." Emily felt sick because it fit all of it, every horrible piece. "And when I opened the vault anyway," she said slowly, "when I did the thing he swore was impossible, he had to improvise. He couldn't stop it anymore, so he just watched and listened. And the second I said who my father was, he had everything Falcone needed. Then he slipped away in the confusion and made his call, and Falcone sent someone to take the documents and kill Sal. Her hands were trembling. It's my fault, Victor. If I'd just stayed quiet, if I'd never opened my mouth, Falcone would never have known I existed. No. Victor grabbed her shoulders and turned her to face him. Listen to me. If you'd stayed quiet, I'd have cut the vault open, and the thermite would have killed us all, or if it didn't, the evidence would be ash, and Falcone would have won completely and forever, and no one would ever have known he existed. You didn't help him tonight, Emily. You did the one thing he never planned for. You opened a door that was supposed to stay shut forever. He's not chasing you because you helped him. He's chasing you because you're the single greatest threat to him that has existed in 40 years. He held her gaze. You. A maid. You scared the most powerful man in the country badly enough that he moved within the hour. Do you understand what that means? It means he's not invincible. It means he's afraid, and a man who's afraid makes mistakes. Emily stared up at him, and slowly the sick guilt in her chest began to harden into something else. Okay, she said. Okay. We need to move, Marco said, glancing back down the dark road. If Henrik called this in an hour ago, this spot's not safe. Whoever took the documents could still be close, could be watching us right now. Victor nodded and pulled Emily back toward their SUV, and they climbed in, and Marco swung the car around, and they left Sal and the empty trunk and the terrible note behind in the dark. And as they drove, Emily's mind was working faster now because the shock was wearing off, and underneath it was something colder and clearer. Victor, she said. The documents are gone. Falcone has them. So the proof against him, the thing my father spent years collecting, it's back in Falcone's hands, which means we've got nothing. We can't go to the feds, we can't move against him, we've got no evidence. We're right back where we started, except now he knows we exist. I know, Victor said grimly. But, Emily said, there's one thing Falcone still doesn't have. Victor looked at her. He doesn't have the man who built the vault, Emily said quietly. He has the documents that were inside it, but he doesn't have the mind that made it. My father. Her voice was steady now, dead steady. Think about it, Victor. My father spent years secretly collecting proof against Falcone and hiding it inside a machine only he could build. Does that sound like a man who put all his eggs in one basket? Does that sound like a man who kept only one copy of everything sitting in one vault that Falcone could take in a single night? Victor's eyes widened slowly. You think there's more, he said. I think my father was the most careful man who ever lived, Emily said. I think he knew exactly who he was dealing with. And I think if he hid proof in that vault, then he hid proof somewhere else too. Somewhere Falcone would never find it. Somewhere that only makes sense if you know how my father's mind works. A backup, a failsafe, because that's what he did his whole life. He never built anything with just one lock. He always built 3. Her voice caught. And there's only one person alive who knows how my father thinks well enough to find it. You, Victor said. Me, Emily said. And maybe if he's still alive, maybe there's a way to reach him. A message he left, a trail, something. My father didn't just disappear, Victor. My father is the kind of man who even locked up for 8 years would have found a way to leave a door open. He left me one in that vault, a star map and a lullaby. He was telling me he believed I'd come. That means he left himself a way to be found. I know it. I feel it. Her eyes were shining. He's out there, Victor. And Falcone has him, and Falcone has the documents, but Falcone does not have me, and I am the one thing my father built his whole life around. I'm the key. I've always been the key. He said so himself on the vault. Find the stars. Find your way home. For a long moment, Victor said nothing. Then he said very quietly, There's something I haven't told you. Emily turned to him. The letter from my father. Victor pulled it out again, and his hands weren't quite steady. There was more, at the bottom. I didn't read it out loud in front of Marco because... He glanced at the front seat, then lowered his voice. There's a line. My father wrote, if you ever find the builder or anyone connected to him, protect them with everything you have because they are the only person alive who knows where Falcone keeps what he values most. Victor swallowed. Emily, my father wasn't just telling me Falcone exists. He was telling me that your father knows Falcone's weakness, knows where he lives, knows what he protects, knows how to hurt him. That's why Falcone has kept your father alive for 8 years, not just because he can build things, because killing him would be too dangerous. Your father knows too much. He's the one man on earth Falcone can't afford to kill and can't afford to free. Emily's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear. Then we have to find him first, she said. Yes. Before Falcone realizes that we know what my father knows. Yes. Which means we're not just running anymore. Emily's voice was fierce now, fierce and low and certain. We're not hiding. We're going hunting. We're going to find my father, and my father is going to tell us how to destroy Falcone, and we are going to burn that man's whole invisible empire to the ground. She looked at Victor. Are you in because I need to know right now, not the boss, not the man who used me in that bunker. You. Are you in? Victor Callahan looked at the maid who had opened the impossible vault, the daughter of a ghost, the girl he had walked past 100 times without seeing, and he felt something he had not felt since he was a boy, sitting across from his father in a restaurant in Little Italy. He felt like he was standing at the beginning of something that mattered. My father spent his whole life afraid of Falcone and never told me, Victor said. He carried it alone and it killed him, and he never once let me help him carry it. And I've spent 6 years too scared to even read his letter. He folded the letter and put it away, and when he looked up, his eyes were clear. I'm done being afraid of a name. I'm in Emily. All the way to the end. We find your father, we find Falcone, and we finish what both our fathers started. Emily let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 8 years. Okay, she said. Then here's where we start. My father left me one door tonight in that vault, the star map. The lullaby. But there was something else on that vault, something I didn't tell anyone about because I didn't understand it until just now. Her eyes were far away. When I was playing the lullaby on the last few notes, the constellation ring turned by itself. Just a little, just 3 degrees, the same 3 degrees he always offset his signature by. She looked at Victor. At the time, I thought it was just the mechanism settling, but it wasn't. He built that in on purpose. When the vault opens, the star map shifts. It stops showing the night he was taken, and it starts showing a different night, a different sky, another date hidden underneath the first one. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He left a second date, Victor, underneath the first, and I only saw it for a second before the vault swung open and everyone started grabbing documents. But I saw it. I saw the stars move, and I know my father. That second date isn't random, it's a message. It's the next door. Victor stared at her. Do you remember it? The second sky? Could you find the date? I remember every star my father ever showed me, Emily said. I just need paper, and a few minutes, and somewhere Falcone can't find us while I work it out. She looked out the window into the racing dark. My father spent 8 years as a prisoner, building a trail of doors for the one person he trusted to walk through them. And tonight I walked through the first one. He's leading me somewhere, Victor, step by step, star by star, and wherever that trail ends. She turned back to him, and her face was set and certain and unafraid. That's where I'll find him. Marco's eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror, and his whole body went rigid. Boss, he said, in a voice gone suddenly flat and careful. Don't turn around fast, but there's a car back there. No headlights. Been sitting 3 cars back since we left the service road. His hands tightened on the wheel. It's matching us, every turn, whoever it is. He swallowed. They've been following us the whole time. Don't slow down, Victor said, very calm, very quiet. Don't speed up. Drive exactly like you've been driving. Emily, put your head down. I want to see who it is. Head down, now. If they've got a rifle, your face in that window is a target. Emily ducked, but she kept her eyes up watching Victor's face because his face was the only mirror she had. And Victor was watching the side mirror with the flat, patient attention of a man who had done this before, who had been hunted before and lived. 1 car, Victor murmured. No lights. Professional. An amateur would have closed the distance by now, would have gotten nervous. This one's just sitting, waiting, which means they're not trying to catch us. His jaw tightened. They're trying to see where we go. They want the trail. They want to know where we run, to who we contact, where we hide. Falcone doesn't want to kill us tonight, Emily. Not yet. He wants to follow us to whatever door your father left next. He wants us to lead him to the second copy." Emily's stomach dropped. "Then we can't go anywhere. We can't work out the star map, we can't hide. We can't do anything because the second we do, we're handing Falcone the exact thing my father spent 8 years hiding from him." "That's the trap," Victor said. "That's why he left us alive on that service road. He wants us running scared, making moves leading him home." He almost smiled, that cold, dangerous smile, which means the only way to beat him is to do the one thing he isn't expecting. Which is, Bomb, stop running. Marco's eyes flicked to the mirror. "Boss, whatever you're thinking, think it fast, because there's a light up ahead, a gas station, and after that, it's open road for 6 miles with nowhere to turn. If we're going to do something, it's now." Victor was quiet for 1 second, too, and Emily could see him running at the angles, the odds, the way he must have run 1,000 decisions in rooms full of dangerous men. "Pull into the gas station," Victor said. "Park under the lights, right under them where anyone watching can see everything. Then we all get out slow, and we go inside and we buy coffee, and we stand in the light where nobody can touch us." He looked at Emily. "A man like Falcone works in the dark, in the quiet, in the places where things can happen and no one sees. So we go somewhere bright and public and full of cameras and we make him wait. And while he's sitting out there in the dark wondering what we're doing, you and I are going to figure out our next move where he can't hear us." "And the car following us?" Emily asked. "We'll have to sit and watch us drink coffee," Victor said, "and wonder. And a man who's used to being invisible does not like to sit in the light and wonder." Marco swung the SUV into the gas station and parked directly beneath the brightest bank of lights, and the three of them got out slowly, deliberately, and Emily felt every hair on her body standing up because somewhere out there in the dark was a car with no lights and a person inside it watching her every move. But Victor was right. Under the lights and the glare, nothing could happen quietly, and whoever was following them knew it. They went inside. Marco stayed near the door watching the lot. Victor steered Emily toward the back near the coffee machine where the security cameras had them cold and no one outside could read their lips. "Talk to me," Victor said low. "The star map, the second date. How fast can you work it out?" Emily grabbed a fistful of napkins and a pen from the counter, and her hands were already moving. "If I can remember the sky clearly enough and I can fast. My father drilled the constellations into me before I could read, but I need to be sure I've got the second date right because a wrong date sends us to the wrong door, and I don't think my father built in room for mistakes." She was sketching now, dots and lines, the shape of a sky. "The first date, the one everyone could see, was the last night I saw him, March 9th. But when the vault opened, the ring shifted 3 degrees and the whole sky changed and there was a new alignment underneath. Orion was gone. There was a different pattern, something lower on the horizon, something." She stopped. Her pen stopped. "Oh." "What?" "The second sky wasn't a random night," Emily whispered. "It's not a date at all. It's a place." She looked up and her eyes were wide. "My father didn't hide a second date under the first. He hid a second location, because a star map doesn't just tell you when, it tells you where. The same stars sit in different places in the sky depending on where you're standing on the earth. And the second alignment, the one that appeared when the vault opened, it's not the sky over London. It's not the sky over New York." Her hand was shaking. "It's the sky over somewhere else, somewhere specific. He's telling me not when to look. He's telling me where he is." Victor leaned in. "Can you find it, the location?" "I need." Emily's mind was racing. "I need to know the exact horizon line, the exact angle of the stars, and then I can work backward to the latitude. It's like triangulation. My father taught it to me as a game when I was little. We'd look at a photo of a sky and he'd say, 'Emily, where on earth was this taken?' And I'd have to figure it out from the stars." Tears sprang to her eyes. "He was training me this whole time, my whole childhood. He was teaching me how to find him, and I never knew. Every game we ever played, he was building the person who could rescue him." Victor put a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Then finish the game, Emily. Where is he?" Emily bent over the napkin, and for 2 full minutes she said nothing, just drew and calculated and crossed out and drew again, and Victor stood guard over her. and Marco watched the lot, and the coffee machine hissed, and somewhere in the dark, a hunter sat and waited. And then Emily's pen stopped, and her whole body went still. "It's north," she said quietly. "Way north. The latitude's higher than New York, higher than Maine. And it's remote, it has to be, because there's no light pollution in the second sky. The stars are too clear, too many of them. This is somewhere with no cities, no towns. Somewhere Falcone could keep a man for 8 years, and no one would ever stumble across him." She looked up. "Canada, maybe, or further, but north and empty and cold and cut off from the world. That's where my father is. That's where Falcone keeps what he values most." Victor absorbed this, and Emily saw something shift in his face. "That fits," he said slowly. "There was always a rumor in the old families, a place up north where people who crossed the wrong men would disappear to and never come back. Everyone thought it was a myth, a story to scare people, a cold place at the top of the world where the ones who knew too much got buried alive." His jaw tightened. "It was never a myth. It was Falcone's. It's where he keeps the people he can't kill and can't free. And your father's been up there for 8 years. Emily's hands were shaking so hard she had to put the pen down. "Boss," Marco said sharply from the door. "The car, it's moving." Victor's head snapped up. "Moving how?" "Pulling in. It's pulling into the lot." Marco's hand went inside his jacket. "One person, getting out, coming toward the store. Boss, they're just walking right up in the light in front of the cameras. They don't care they're coming straight in." "Emily behind me," Victor said, and there was no argument in it, and Emily didn't argue. She moved behind him, the napkin crushed in her fist, and Victor's hand went to his own gun, but didn't draw it because they were in the light on camera. And whoever this was had chosen this ground on purpose, which meant they weren't afraid of the light either. The door chimed, and Henrik Vanderberg walked in. Emily's breath left her body. The old cryptographer looked exactly as he had in the bunker, silver-haired, dignified in his fine coat, except now Emily could see him clearly for what he was, and it made her sick. He raised both hands slowly, showing them empty, and he stopped a few feet inside the door. "Please," Henrik said, "do not do anything foolish. I am unarmed, and we are as you have cleverly arranged in a very public and well-recorded place. I only want to talk." "You son of a—" Victor started forward. "Victor." Henrik's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You killed no one tonight who did not need killing, and neither did I, because I have never in my life killed anyone. I am not a violent man. I am a cryptographer. I broke codes. That is all I ever did." He lowered his hands slightly. "But you are right about the rest. I have worked for the man you call Falcone for 19 years. He owns my debts. He owns my family's safety. He has owned me since long before he ever heard the name Callahan. And tonight he sent me into your home to make certain that vault was never opened. You told me it was impossible," Victor said low and deadly. "You looked me in the eye, and you told me to burn it." "Because those were my orders," Henrik said simply. "And because I believed it was true. Victor, I have spent my entire career studying locks, and I swear to you on my life, I believed that machine could not be opened by any living person. I was not lying to you. I was as certain of it as I have ever been certain of anything." His eyes moved slowly to Emily, and then she walked up to it, and she opened it with a song. And in 19 years of serving that man, in 19 years of watching him win and win and win, I saw for the first time something he did not plan for, something he could not control. Henrik's voice dropped. "I saw him lose." Emily stared at him. "Why are you here, Henrik? You already told Falcone everything. You already got Sal killed. You already handed him the documents. What else is there?" "I did not hand him the documents," Henrik said. The room went silent. "I made a call, yes," Henrik said. "In the confusion, I slipped away, and I called my handler, and I told him the vault was open and that the daughter of Jonathan Carter had opened it. That much I did, and I will not pretend otherwise because I was afraid, and fear has made me a coward for 19 years. His hands trembled. "But I did not take the documents. I did not kill your man, Sal. Someone else did that. Someone else in your organization, Victor. Someone I do not know, someone Falcone trusts more than he trusts me. There are layers to this you do not understand. Falcone never uses just one asset. He never trusts just one man. There were 2 of us in your house tonight, At least two. Me, the one you were meant to catch, and another, the one you were never meant to suspect. Victor's face went cold. You're lying. You're trying to save yourself. Point me at some phantom so I stop looking at you. Victor. Henrik took a step closer, ignoring the gun, ignoring everything. I am 61 years old. I have served a monster for 19 years and hated myself every single day. Tonight I watched a girl do something I did not believe was possible, and it broke something loose in me, something I thought had died a long time ago. I did not come here to save myself. I came here because I am done. Do you understand I am finished being his? And I came to tell you the one thing that Falcone would kill me for telling you the thing that might be worth my worthless life if it helps you. His voice dropped to almost nothing. The other asset, the one who took the documents and killed your man. I do not know his name, but I know one thing about him because Falcone let it slip once years ago when he was drunk and proud and thought I was too frightened to ever repeat it. Henrik's eyes were wet. The man Falcone has closest to you, the one you would never suspect, has been with your family since before your father died. He was there the night your father was shot, Victor. He is the reason your father is dead, and you have trusted him with your life every single day since. The silence in that gas station was total. Emily watched Victor's face, and it was terrible to see because she watched him understand, watched the horror climb up through him. Watched him run the list one more time, the shortest and most painful list of all the people who had been with the family before his father died, the people who had been there that night, the people he had trusted absolutely for 6 years. No, Victor whispered. I am sorry, Henrik said. No, say his name. If you know, say it. Say his name. I told you I do not know his name, Henrik said. Falcone never gave me that. I only know what I told you. Since before your father died, there the night he was shot, closer to you than anyone. He spread his hands. I have given you everything I have. It is not much, but it is the truth, and it is the first true thing I have done in 19 years, and if I die for it tonight, then at least I will die having done one honest thing. And that was when Marco spoke from over by the door in a strange, quiet voice. Boss, Marco said, he's lying. Victor turned. He's lying, Marco said again, and there was something wrong with his voice, something flat and cold, that Emily had never heard from him before. There's no second asset. There's no phantom in the family. It's just him. He's trying to poison you against your own people so you tear yourself apart. Same thing you were worried about in the car. Don't listen to him, boss. Put him down and let's go. And Emily, watching, felt the whole world go very slow and very quiet, because there was something in Marco's face that did not match his words, a stillness, a readiness, and she remembered what Sal's body had told her on that dark service road. Seatbelt on, hands near the wheel, window rolled down. Sal had stopped for someone he trusted, someone in the family, someone who could walk right up to that window and make him feel safe. Marco, Emily said slowly. Where were you when we came out of the tunnel and loaded the cars? You were driving our car, but before that, in the bunker, when Victor gave the order for the cases. Where did you go? Marco's eyes moved to her. I was loading cases, same as everyone. You took a case to the second car, Emily said, and her voice was shaking now because the pieces were falling into place and she couldn't stop them. You said so yourself. You said you'd take the far case. You walked to Sal's car, you loaded the documents into Sal's trunk, and then you came back and drove us. Her heart was hammering. You knew which car had the documents, Marco. You're the one who put them there. You knew exactly which car to peel off. That's insane, Marco said, but he had gone very still. And Sal stopped for you, Emily whispered. On that dark road, Sal rolled his window down for you, Marco, because you're family, because he'd known you for years, because when you flashed your lights and pulled up beside him, he never once thought he had anything to fear. You could walk right up to his window. You could stand there and smile at him. And you could... Emily. Victor's voice was barely a breath. He had turned fully now, and he was looking at Marco, at the man who had driven them all night, the man who had sworn 12 years of loyalty, the man with the scar from his father's shooting, and Emily watched him see it, watched him see all of it at once. The scar, Victor said. You always show me the scar, from the restaurant, from the night my father died. You were there. You were always there. You took a bullet for my father." His voice cracked. "Or did you take a bullet for him, Marco? Or did you just tell me you did for 6 years, so I'd never once look at you and wonder how the shooters got so close to a man who was never supposed to be reachable?" Marco said nothing, and his silence was the loudest thing Emily had ever heard. "Say I'm wrong," Victor said, and his voice was breaking completely, because this was worse than the vault, worse than the letter, worse than anything. This was the one man he had never doubted. "Marco, please, say I'm wrong. Tell me it's the old man lying. Tell me it's the girl seeing things. Tell me you didn't. Tell me you weren't there that night for the wrong reasons. Tell me my father didn't die because of you." His eyes were wet. "Say I'm wrong, Marco. You've got one chance. Say it." For a long, long moment, Marco just looked at him. And then very slowly something changed in Marco's face. The loyalty drained out of it. The warmth, the 12 years, all of it like a mask sliding off, and underneath was something Emily had never seen and would never forget, something patient and cold and old, and she understood that she had never once in 11 months actually seen this man at all. "You know," Marco said, and even his voice was different now, lower, calmer, a stranger's voice. "For 6 years, I hoped you'd never open that envelope. Your father was a sentimental fool right up to the end, writing letters, leaving warnings. He figured it out at the very end that there was someone above him, that the war was never real. He figured out Falcone, and he wrote it all down for you, and he handed it to you, and then—" Marco smiled, and it was the most terrible thing Emily had ever seen. "And then he had a very unfortunate dinner in Little Italy, and I stood right next to him. And I made sure the men who needed to get close got close. And then I held him while he died, boss, and I cried real tears, and you believed every one of them for 6 years. "You killed my father," Victor said. "Falcone killed your father," Marco said. "I just opened the door, same as I've opened every door for 19 years, same as I opened the door for Sal tonight." He tilted his head. "The old man's right about one thing, Victor. Falcone always has two, the one you catch and the one you never suspect. Henrik was always the one you'd catch. He was born to be caught, nervous, guilty, weak. And me—" Marco spread his hands, the same easy gesture Emily had seen 100 times from a man she now realized she had never known at all. "I was the one you'd die for." And his hand, which had been resting so casually inside his jacket, came out fast. But Emily was already moving. Because in that frozen second, while Victor stood destroyed, while Henrik gasped, while Marco's gun came up, Emily Carter did the only thing her hands knew how to do. Under pressure, the thing 8 years of hard labor and one impossible vault had taught her. She moved without thinking, without fear, and she grabbed the scalding pot of coffee off the machine beside her and threw the whole thing into Marco's face. Marco screamed. The gun went off wild, the shot cracking into the ceiling. Victor tackled him. They went down hard, and Henrik shouted, and the clerk behind the counter dove for the floor, and for a few chaotic seconds it was all noise and struggle, and then Victor was on top, his own gun jammed under Marco's chin, both of them heaving for breath. "Don't," Victor said. "Don't move. Give me one reason, just one." Marco blistered and, gasping, looked up at him and laughed. "You won't kill me," he wheezed. "You need me. I'm the only thread you've got that leads to Falcone. Kill me and you're blind. You'll never find him. You'll never find her father. You need me alive and you know it, and that's the only reason I'm still breathing." He grinned through the pain. "That's the thing about Falcone, boss. Even when you win, you lose. Even when you catch us, we've already got you." And Emily, standing over them, shaking the empty coffee pot still in her hand, looked down at the man who had killed Victor's father and betrayed Sal and served the monster who held her own father captive. And she felt something rise up in her that was colder and clearer than anything she had ever felt. "He's right that we need him," she said quietly, "but he's wrong about why." She crouched down close to Marco's ruined face, and she looked into his eyes without any fear at all. "You've been in Victor's family for 19 years, close to Falcone, trusted, which means you know things. You know where they take people. You know the place in the north. You know how to reach it, how to get in, who guards it." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You know where my father is." Marco's grin faltered just slightly. "You're going to take us to him," Emily said. Not because you want to, because you're going to spend the rest of tonight discovering that there is nothing on this earth more dangerous than a person with nothing left to lose and everything left to find. She stood up. You took my father from me 8 years ago, and now you're going to give him back. Every mile of the way there, you're going to give him back. The gas station was silent, except for Marco's ragged breathing and the drip of spilled coffee, and Victor looked up at Emily from where he knelt on the man who had betrayed everything. And Henrik stood by the door with tears on his old face, and outside in the dark, the cold northern night stretched all the way to the top of the world, to a place with no name, where a horologist named Jonathan Carter had been waiting 8 years for his daughter to find the stars and come home. They drove north for 3 days. Marco sat cuffed in the back with Henrik watching him, and mile by mile, hour by hour, he gave them the road, not because he wanted to, but because Emily had been right about him. A man who serves a monster for 19 years does it out of fear, and the moment the fear of Falcone became smaller than the fear of the cold girl who had thrown scalding coffee in his face and never once blinked, Marco began to talk. He talked about the place at the top of the world, a compound, old, cut off, reachable by one frozen road that only opened part of the year. He talked about the guards, the routines, the single airstrip, and he talked reluctantly about the prisoner they kept in the East Wing, the one they called the Watchmaker, the one Falcone valued above all others, the one who had never once in 8 years stopped working. He never begs, Marco said on the second night, staring out the window. In 19 years, I've seen men beg for everything. Your father built things for Falcone, and he never begged once. He just worked. And every so often, he'd look up and ask the same question. Marco's voice was strange. He'd ask, is she safe? That's all. Not let me go, not please. Just, is she safe? Over and over. 8 years. Emily turned around in her seat. And what did you tell him? Marco was quiet for a long moment. I told him yes, he said. Every time. I don't know why. It would have been easier to tell him nothing. But I told him yes, she's safe. And his whole face would change and he'd go back to work. Marco looked at her, and something almost human flickered in his ruined face. He built you into everything you know, every lock, every machine. I used to watch him and think the man's insane, he's putting a person into steel. But he wasn't insane. He was leaving you a trail. 8 years of doors, and he never knew if you'd ever find the first one. He looked away. And then you did. Emily turned back around and said nothing, because if she spoke she would cry, and she had promised herself she would not cry again until she was holding her father. They reached the compound on the 3rd night. The plan was Victor's, a cold and precise, built from everything Marco had given them, and everything Henrik knew about how Falcone's mind worked. They would not storm it. You do not storm a fortress at the top of the world with 3 people and a traitor. Instead, they would use the one thing Falcone had never been able to control, the one thing that had cracked his whole world open in the first place. Emily, he knows you opened the vault, Victor said, as they sat in the dark outside the compound. He knows you're Jonathan Carter's daughter. Henrik made sure of that the first night, so he's expecting you. Not here, not now, but somewhere someday. He's been waiting for you the same way your father has, except your father's been waiting with hope, and Falcone's been waiting with a trap. He looked at her. So we give him what he's waiting for. We walk you right up to the front door. And while every eye in that place is on the impossible girl who beat the Leviathan Henrik, and I go in the back through the service tunnel Marco's going to show us, and we find your father, and we get him out. And if it goes wrong, Emily asked. Then you keep him talking, Victor said. You're good at that. You kept an entire room of armed men frozen for 10 minutes with nothing but your voice and your father's ghost. Do it again. Buy us time. Because the second we have your father, we have the one man alive who knows where Falcone's real evidence is hidden, the backup you said your father would have left. And the second we have that, Falcone is finished. 40 years of hiding gone. All of it comes down to the next hour. He put his hand on her shoulder. You've walked through every door your father left you, Emily. This is the last one. On the other side of it is him. Emily walked up to the front gate of the compound alone. She walked with her head high and her hands open and empty, a 22-year-old maid in a borrowed coat walking into the fortress of the most powerful criminal on earth. And she was not afraid because 8 years of an empty chair at the dinner table had burned all the fear out of her a long time ago. The gate opened before she reached it. They were expecting her. Of course they were. Men came out armed wary, and they searched her and found nothing, and they led her across the frozen ground and into the main house into a warm room lined with books where a fire burned, and a single chair sat facing the flames, and in the chair sat an old man. He was not what Emily had imagined. She had imagined a monster, and instead there was a slight, elegant, silver-haired man in his 70s with soft hands and kind eyes, and the gentle, patient face of someone's grandfather. He rose when she entered, and he smiled, and when he spoke his voice was warm. "Emily Carter," Falcone said. "At last. Do you know in 40 years I have only been surprised 3 times, and 2 of them were you, the night you opened the Leviathan, and tonight when you were foolish enough to walk up to my front door." He gestured to a chair. "Sit, please. You've come a very long way, and I suspect neither of us has much time, so let us not waste it pretending to be anything other than what we are." Emily sat. "Where is my father?" "Close," Falcone said. "Alive. Well cared for in his way. He is the finest craftsman I have ever employed, and I do not squander what is valuable." He settled back into his chair. "Your father built me wonders, Emily. Machines you cannot imagine. He is an artist, and artists I have learned do not respond to threats or pain. They respond to purpose. So I gave him one. I told him that every machine he built for me kept his daughter safe, that his cooperation was the only thing standing between you and harm. It was not true, of course. I never touched you. I never needed to. I simply let him believe it, and he worked like a man possessed for 8 years because he thought he was protecting you." Falcone smiled gently. "In a sense he was. Belief is a powerful lock, stronger than any steel." Emily's hands tightened in her lap. "You used his love for me as a chain." "I used his love for you as an engine," Falcone corrected mildly. "There is a difference. A chain merely holds, an engine produces, and your father, motivated by his love for you, produced the most extraordinary security systems the criminal world has ever seen." He tilted his head. "And now, here you are, the engine's daughter, sitting in my study. You must understand my curiosity. What did you come here to do, Emily? You have no weapon, no army, no leverage. You came to a fortress at the end of the world with your bare hands. Why? Because I'm the leverage," Emily said quietly. Falcone's eyebrows rose just slightly. "You said it yourself," Emily went on, and her voice was steadier than she had any right to be. "My father worked for 8 years because he believed it kept me safe. That belief is your engine. That belief is the only thing that's kept him building for you instead of building against you." She leaned forward. "But that belief only works as long as he doesn't know the truth. And I'm about to tell him the truth. That you never protected me. That you lied to him for 8 years. That every machine he built for a lie." Her eyes locked onto Falcone's. "What do you think happens to your engine then? What does the finest craftsman in the world build for the man who stole 8 years of his life with a lie when his daughter is standing right in front of him and he has nothing left to lose?" For the first time, something moved behind Falcone's kind old eyes. "You would not," he said softly. "You would be destroying the very thing keeping him alive. As long as he is useful, he lives. The moment he stops building, he is worthless to me." "He's already worthless to you," Emily said. "You just don't know it yet, because somewhere out there, my father left a backup, a second copy of everything he collected against you. Evidence you've never found hidden somewhere only he and I could ever understand because he built it into the stars, the same way he built everything into the stars." She saw the flicker again, sharper this time. Real fear. "You've spent 8 years thinking you controlled him, but my father was never building your machines. He was building my education. Every lock taught me a skill. Every code left me a message. He turned 8 years of captivity into the longest, most patient rescue mission in history. And he made me the weapon, and you never even saw it happening." She stood up slowly. You didn't imprison a craftsman, Falcone. You imprisoned a father. And there is nothing on this earth more dangerous than that, and you were too busy admiring your engine to notice." Falcone was on his feet now, and the kindly grandfather was gone, and underneath was something old and cold and frightened. "Guards!" "They won't reach you in time," Emily said, and the lights went out. It happened all at once, the whole compound plunging into darkness, and Emily heard shouting and running, and somewhere far off a door slamming because Victor and Henrik had reached the electrical room exactly when they said they would, and now the fortress at the top of the world was blind. Falcone lunged for the door calling for his men, and Emily did not chase him because chasing him was not the plan. The plan was the darkness. The plan was the chaos. The plan was that in the confusion, while every guard in the compound scrambled for the girl and the sabotage, 3 days of Marco's knowledge and Victor's cold precision would converge on a single door in the east wing. Emily ran through this dark house, and she did not need light because her father had taught her to move by the stars, and she carried the map of this place in her head from 3 days of Marco's descriptions, and she reached the east wing, and she reached the door, and it was locked. Of course it was locked. It was always going to be locked. Her whole life had come down to a locked door. But Emily Carter knew locks now. She knew them the way she knew her own heartbeat. And this one was her father's work. She could feel it under her fingers, the particular precision of it, the signature offset, and she almost laughed because he had built his own prison door, and he had built it the way he built everything, with a way in for the one person who knew how he thought. She found the mechanism, she found the pattern, and in the dark, by feel alone with the sounds of chaos echoing through the compound behind her, Emily opened the last door her father had ever built. It swung open, and there in a plain room rising slowly from a workbench, covered in gears and blueprints and half-finished machines, was a man, older than she remembered, grayer, thinner, 8 years thinner. But his eyes, when they found her face in the darkness, were exactly the same eyes that had pointed at the stars over London and told her to find her way home. "Emily," Jonathan Carter whispered. She could not speak. She could not move. 8 years, and now 3 feet, and she could not cross them. "You found the stars," her father said, and his voice broke on the words. "You found the stars, and you found your way home. I knew you would. Every day for 8 years I told myself she'll come, she'll remember, she'll find them. And here you are." Tears were streaming down his weathered face. "Here you are." And then Emily crossed the 3 feet and 8 years, and she was in her father's arms, and neither of them could stop shaking, and the machines and the darkness and the whole terrible fortress fell away, and there was only this, a father and a daughter, and the impossible distance between them finally closed. "I've got you," Emily wept into his shoulder. I've got you, I'm here, I found you." "My girl," Jonathan said, holding her face in his hands. "My brilliant girl, look at what you did. Look at what you became." Then his face changed urgent. "Emily, listen to me. We don't have much time. There's something you need to know, something I hid." "The backup," Emily said. "I know, I already used it. It's the reason we're here. Dad, I need you to trust me. There are people with me, good people. One of them lost his father to the same man who took you, and we came to get you out, all of you, tonight. But we have to move." The door behind them filled with light. Victor stood there, gun raised, Henrik behind him, and for one heart-stopping second, Jonathan Carter pushed Emily behind him, putting his thin body between his daughter and the armed stranger. But Emily grabbed his arm. "No, Dad, he's with me. Victor, this is Victor. He's the one who helped me find you." She looked at Victor, and at the gun, and at the man behind him. "Did you get it? Did you find Falcone?" "He ran," Victor said grimly, "out the North Road. But he's not getting far, and he's not what matters right now." His eyes moved to Jonathan Carter, and something passed over his face, something raw. "Mr. Carter, my name is Victor Callahan. Your work protected my family's secrets for years. And my father." He swallowed. "My father was the one who hired you all those years ago, the one Falcone punished by taking you. My father spent the rest of his life trying to find you and failing, and it ate at him until the day he died." Victor's voice was thick. "I'm here to finish what he couldn't. I'm here to get you home. Jonathan Carter looked at this young man with the gun and the wet eyes, and slowly he nodded. "Then we should go," Jonathan said. "Quickly, but first—" He turned to his workbench, and from beneath it he pulled a small object, a device no bigger than a music box, brass and glass and impossibly intricate. "This is why he could never kill me. This is what I've really been building underneath everything else a little at a time for 8 years. He held it out. Every account, every name, every crime Falcone ever committed, everyone he ever bought, every judge and cop and senator he ever owned. I encoded all of it in here in the only language he could never read, the language your father built into you, Emily, music and stars and time." His eyes shone. "The documents in your vault were the bait, Victor. This is the sword, and it only opens for the one person in the world who knows how I think." He pressed it into Emily's hands. "Finish it, sweetheart. You've earned it. Open the last one." And Emily Carter, standing in her father's prison at the top of the world, took the little machine in her hands, and she felt the gears, and she heard the faint ticking, and she closed her eyes, and she played the melody one last time, her lullaby, the song that was truly and completely hers, and the little box clicked and opened and spilled its light across the room. Everything Falcone had ever hidden, laid bare, in the hands of the maid who beat the impossible vault. Falcone did not get far. The evidence in Jonathan Carter's music box did what no army and no rival and no federal task force had managed to do in 40 years. It reached everywhere at once. Every name in that box was a thread, and when they pulled them all at once, the whole invisible empire came apart in a single week. The judges Falcone owned, the officers he paid, the bosses he had played against each other for 4 decades, while they never once looked up to see the hand that moved them. Falcone had built his power on being invisible, and Jonathan Carter, from inside a prison at the end of the world, had spent 8 years slowly, patiently, lovingly making him visible. They found Falcone in a cabin 60 miles south, and this time there was no kindly grandfather and no warm fire, just a frightened old man who had spent 40 years being the most dangerous person alive, and who now understood at last that he had been outbuilt by a horologist and outsmarted by a maid. Victor turned him over to the one authority Falcone could not buy, because Emily insisted on it, because Emily had learned something her father knew, and Victor's father never did, that you do not answer a monster by becoming one. The evidence went to the FBI, all of it, including at Victor's own instruction enough to end the Callahan empire alongside Falcone's. "You're destroying yourself," Emily said to him the night before it all came down. "You know that. The evidence takes you down too, everything your family built." "My family built its whole life inside a war that was never real," Victor said quietly. 40 years of killing each other over a game a dead man was playing in the dark. My father died for it. Sal died for it. I'm done, Emily. I don't want to inherit a lie. Let it all burn. Falcone's empire and mine together in the same fire." He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked free. "You taught me that. In the bunker. You walked up to the impossible thing, and instead of forcing it, instead of taking it by strength, the way my whole family always has, you opened it with love. I spent my whole life believing power was the only language, and then a maid opened the one door no amount of power could." He almost smiled. "I'd rather lose everything the right way than keep it the wrong way. My father never learned that. I did. From you." Jonathan Carter came home to London, though home was a strange word for it now, after 8 years after everything. But he had his daughter. And in the end, that was the only home either of them had ever really needed. He never built another lock. He said he'd built enough machines for one lifetime, and the only masterpiece he'd ever truly cared about was already finished, and she was standing right in front of him. As for Emily, the world tried very hard to make her famous. The maid who beat the Leviathan, the girl who solved in 1 minute what 25 experts failed to crack, the daughter who walked into the fortress of the most powerful criminal alive with nothing but her bare hands and brought his whole empire down. But Emily never gave a single interview, never told the story, never once traded on the night that changed everything. Because she understood something the world never would. She hadn't done it to be extraordinary. She'd done it to bring her father home. Years later, someone who knew a piece of the story asked Victor Callahan, who had served his time and come out the other side a quieter and better man, what it had really been like that night in the bunker. The night 25 of the smartest people on Earth failed, and a poor maid solved it in 1 minute and left the most dangerous man in New York with nothing to say. And Victor thought about it for a long moment, and then he answered. "Everyone always asks about the vault," he said. "How she opened it, what the trick was. And there was no trick. That's what nobody understands. I had spent my whole life around powerful people, brilliant people, dangerous people, and not one of them could open that door because they all tried to take it. And then this girl that I had walked past 100 times without ever once seeing her, this girl I thought was nothing, walked up to the impossible thing, and she didn't take it. She loved it open." He was quiet for a moment. "She wasn't the weakest person in that room. She was the only strong one. And it took me 32 years and losing everything I ever had to finally understand the difference." The maid solved in 1 minute what the experts failed to solve at all, and she did it not with genius, but with a father's love encoded in a daughter's memory. And in the end, that was the one lock in all the world that no amount of money or power or fear could ever pick, and it was the only one that ever truly mattered. The trial lasted 4 months. For 4 months, the name Falcone, a name that had been a ghost story whispered among criminals for 40 years, a name used to frighten men who frightened everyone else, became the most spoken name in America. And every single day of those 4 months, the entire case rested on a small brass music box and on the testimony of the 2 people who understood it. Emily Carter had never wanted to stand in front of anyone. For 11 months, she had made herself invisible, and for 8 years before that, she had lived quietly with her grief, and every instinct in her body told her to disappear again the moment her father was safe. But she could not disappear, because the prosecutors needed her, and more than that, her father needed her. Jonathan Carter was not well. That was the thing the world never saw in all its headlines about the genius horologist and the miraculous rescue. 8 years in a room at the top of the world had taken something out of him that no reunion could fully give back. His hands, once the steadiest in the world, trembled now when he was tired. His memory, which had held 10,000 star maps, sometimes slipped and lost the thread of a sentence halfway through. And his heart, the doctor said, had been strained by years of cold and stress and quiet patient despair, and it was not as strong as it should have been for a man of his years. "You don't have to testify," Emily told him the night before he was called to the stand. "I can do it. I understand the box now. I can explain all of it. You don't have to stand up in front of those people and relive 8 years of your life." Jonathan looked at his daughter across the small kitchen table of the safe house where they were staying, and he smiled. And it was the same smile she remembered from her childhood, the one that made her feel like the most important person in the world. "Emily," he said, "do you know what kept me alive up there for 8 years in that room building machines for a monster? You thought you were keeping me safe." "That was part of it," he said, "but it wasn't all of it. The truth is, after the first year I stopped believing I would ever come home. I made my peace with dying in that room. And once I did that, I could have simply stopped, given up. Let my hands go still and let the cold take me. Many men in that place did exactly that." He reached across the table and took her hands in his trembling ones. "But I didn't. And do you know why? Because I decided that even if I never saw you again, I could still do one last thing for you. I could leave you a trail. I could turn my prison into a classroom and teach you from 1,000 miles away everything you'd need to survive a world that had monsters like Falcone in it. Every lock I built as a lesson, every code a message. I couldn't be your father anymore, so I became your teacher in the only language I had left." His eyes filled. "So no, sweetheart. I will not sit in a chair while you stand up alone in front of the world. I have spent 8 years unable to stand beside you. Tomorrow I stand. If it's the last thing my body ever does, I stand beside my daughter. Do you understand?" Emily could not answer. She only held his hands and nodded and wept. And the next day they stood together. The prosecutor asked Jonathan Carter to explain for the jury how a man could encode 40 years of a criminal empire's secrets into a music box. and Jonathan, in his quiet, trembling, dignified voice, explained it. He explained that music is mathematics, and that mathematics is a language, and that the stars are a clock, and that a clock is a story if you know how to read it. He explained that he had built a machine that could not be opened by force or by genius or by any amount of money, but only by a single person in all the world. The one person whose mind had been shaped note by note and star by star to fit its lock like a key. "And who is that person?" the prosecutor asked. Jonathan Carter looked at his daughter, sitting in the front row, and his whole weathered face softened. "My daughter," he said. "Emily. The best thing I ever made was not a machine. It was her. Everything else was just my way of telling her so from a place I never thought I'd leave." There was not a dry eye in the courtroom. And when Emily herself took the stand and opened the box in front of the jury, playing the lullaby her father had written for her at birth, the same melody she had played to open the Leviathan in a criminal's bunker 4 months and a lifetime ago, the little machine spilled its light and its secrets across the courtroom, and 40 years of Falcone's hidden empire lay exposed for all the world to see, and it was over. The jury took 4 hours. Falcone was convicted on more counts than the clerk could read aloud without pausing for breath. The man who had spent 40 years being invisible would spend the rest of his life in a cell where everyone could see him, which was Emily. Thought a fitting sentence for a man who had built his entire power on never being seen. But the verdict that stayed with Emily was not Falcone's. It was Victor's. Because Victor Callahan had done the thing he swore he would do. He had handed the FBI evidence that convicted Falcone, and in the same envelope evidence that convicted himself. The Callahan empire, 40 years in the building, came apart in the same fire as the man who had secretly controlled it. And Victor did not fight it. He did not hire an army of lawyers to save himself. He stood in front of a judge and he accepted the consequences of a life he had inherited, but chosen every day to continue. "Why?" Emily asked him the last time she saw him before he went away. They sat across from each other in a plain room, and Victor looked lighter than she had ever seen him, as though a weight he'd carried since childhood had finally been set down. "You could have kept your name out of it. You had the evidence. You controlled what the FBI saw. You could have handed them Falcone and walked away clean. Why did you give them yourself, too?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember what Henrik said?" he asked. "In the gas station. He said he'd served a monster for 19 years and hated himself every day. And I remember standing there thinking, I'm no different. I've hated myself for years, too. I just never had the courage to say it out loud." He looked at his hands. "My father built an empire out of a lie, Emily. A war that was never real, run by a man none of us could see. And I inherited that lie at 26, and I made it bigger because I thought that was strength. I thought power was the only thing that was real." He looked up at her. "And then I watched a maid open a vault that couldn't be opened, and I realized I had it exactly backwards my whole life. You didn't beat that vault with power. You beat it with the truth of who you were, with love. And I thought if I want to be free, actually free, not just out of Falcone's shadow, but out of my own, then I have to do the same thing. I have to stop hiding. I have to answer for who I really am and let it burn and walk out the other side as something true instead of something powerful." He smiled, and it was a real smile, an unguarded one. "You cost me everything, Emily Carter. My money, my name, my whole life. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me." Emily reached across the table and took his hand. "You'll be out someday," she said. "You cooperated. You brought down the biggest criminal in the country. That counts. And when I get out, Victor said, I'm going to do something honest for the first time in my life. I don't know what yet. Maybe I'll fix clocks." He laughed, and it was the first time she had ever heard him laugh without any darkness in it. "Your father could teach me, if he'd have a Callahan for a student." "He'd like that," Emily said softly. "He would. He always said the most dangerous thing in the world is a person who decides to change. He'd like you very much, Victor." And she meant it because it was true. Henrik Vanderberg was not charged. Emily had insisted on that too, standing in front of federal prosecutors with the same quiet, immovable certainty she had shown in the bunker, arguing for the old cryptographer who had served a monster for 19 years, and then on one impossible night chosen to stop. Henrik had walked into a public gas station, knowing it might cost him his life, to hand them the thread that unraveled everything. Without Henrik's warning about the second asset, they never would have unmasked Marco. Without unmasking Marco, they never would have found the road north. Without the road north, Jonathan Carter would still be in that room at the top of the world-building machines until his heart gave out. He was a coward for 19 years, Emily told the prosecutors, and then he was brave for one night, and the brave night is the reason we're all sitting here. If you punish the man who found the courage to break, you teach everyone else that breaking isn't worth it. You teach them to stay loyal to their monsters. I won't be part of that. She had learned somewhere in that long, terrible night how to make a room listen. Let him go. Let him spend whatever years he has left as a free man who did one good thing. That's a better ending than a cell, and it's a better lesson for the next frightened man who wants to break free. They let Henrik go. He came to see Emily and her father before he left, an old man in a fine coat, humbled and quiet, and he stood in the doorway and could barely speak. I broke the greatest lock of my career the night I watched your daughter open that vault, Henrik finally said to Jonathan Carter. Not a lock of steel, a lock inside myself. I had convinced myself for 19 years that I had no choice, that I was owned, that there was no door out. And then I watched a child who had every reason to stay small and silent walk up to the impossible and open it. And I understood that the only lock that ever truly held me was the one I'd built in my own head. His voice shook. You built a daughter who freed more than one prisoner that night, Mr. Carter. She freed me too. I only came to say thank you, and I am sorry for all of it. Jonathan Carter rose on his trembling legs and crossed the room, and to everyone's surprise, he embraced the old cryptographer. We were both prisoners of the same man, Jonathan said. You in your fear, me in my cell, and we were both set free by the same girl. There is nothing to forgive between us, Henrik. Go and live. That's the only thing any of us owes the ones who saved us, to actually live. And Henrik went, and he did live quietly in a small town by the sea, fixing nothing more dangerous than crossword puzzles for the rest of his days. And every year on the anniversary of the night in the bunker, he sent Emily a single letter, always with the same closing line. Thank you for the door. Marco was the only one who got no mercy and wanted none. He had killed Victor's father. He had killed Sal. He had spent 19 years opening doors for a monster and feeling nothing. And even at the end, even facing the rest of his life in a cell, he never once broke, never once apologized, never once showed a single crack in the cold and patient thing he had become. He testified when compelled, gave up the road north, when the fear of Emily outweighed the fear of Falcone, and then he simply went silent and stayed silent and was led away to a place he would never leave. The last thing he ever said to Emily was in the courthouse hallway as the guards took him past her. You know the funny thing, Marco said, stopping for just a moment. Your father asked me for 8 years if you were safe, and I always told him yes. And I only ever told him one true thing in 19 years, and that was it. He looked at her with those cold, unreadable eyes. You were safe, right up until you decided you didn't want to be anymore. Right up until you walked up to that vault. Something almost like respect flickered in his face. He built a weapon and called it a daughter, and I never saw it coming. Nobody did. And then the guards pulled him on, and he was gone. And Emily never saw him again, and she did not waste another moment of her life thinking about him, because he did not deserve the space. And then finally, when the trials were over, and the headlines had faded and the world had moved on to the next impossible story, there was only a father and a daughter and a small workshop in London that Emily had bought with the reward money the FBI insisted on giving her money. She had almost refused until her father talked her out of it. Take it, Jonathan had said. Not for you. For the workshop. Every genius needs a workshop. And you, my girl, are going to need one. I'm not a genius, Dad. You're the genius. I just remembered what you taught me. Jonathan Carter had looked at his daughter then with an expression she would remember for the rest of her life. Emily, he said, listen to me, because this is the most important thing I will ever tell you, and my heart tells me I won't have as many years left to tell you things as I would like." He took her hands. 25 of the finest minds in the world stood in front of my vault and failed. Not because they weren't clever. They were brilliant, every one of them. They failed because they tried to solve it with their minds alone. And a machine like that cannot be solved with the mind alone. It requires the heart. It requires someone who understands that a lock is not a problem to be conquered, but a message to be received. That is not a skill I taught you. That is who you are. I built the vault. But the person who could open it, the person who could hear a machine and love it into opening, I didn't build that. I only had the great fortune to be her father. His eyes shone. You are not a genius because you remembered what I taught you. You are a genius because of what you brought to it that I never could. Do not ever, ever let anyone, including yourself, tell you that you were just the maid who got lucky. You were the only person on this earth who could have done what you did. You always were, from the day you were born. And so Emily took the money and she built the workshop, and she and her father worked in it together side by side for the years they had left. They were good years, fewer than either of them wanted, but good. Jonathan's heart, strained by all it had endured, gave him 3 more years, and Emily was grateful for every single day of them because she had spent 8 years with an empty chair at her table, and now the chair was full again, and she never once in 3 years took a single morning of it for granted. Her father taught her everything, not just the mechanics of clocks and vaults and locks, but the philosophy underneath it all, the thing that had made him the greatest horologist in the world, the belief that time was not an enemy to be feared, but a story to be honored, that every mechanism was a small monument to the human wish to hold on to the things we love before they pass. And Emily, who had lost her father to time and then found him again, understood this better than any student he could ever have hoped for. They fixed clocks for ordinary people, grandfather clocks passed down through families, a music box a widow brought in that had belonged to her late husband and played the song from their wedding, a cheap wristwatch a young man carried in apologizing that it wasn't worth fixing that had belonged to his father who'd just passed. Emily fixed them all, and she never charged the ones that carried grief, and word spread through London that there was a workshop where a young woman fixed the clocks that mattered most, the ones that weren't about telling time at all, but about holding on. And Victor Callahan, when he finally came out years later, quieter and grayer and free at last, of everything he had once been, did exactly what he'd said he would. He came to London. He knocked on the door of the workshop, and he asked humbly if the offer still stood, if a former Mafia boss might learn to fix clocks. Emily's father had passed by then, but Emily was there, and she opened the door, and she looked at the man she had met on the worst and most important night of both their lives, and she smiled. "My father saved a place for you," she said. "He said the most dangerous thing in the world is a person who decides to change, and he wanted to meet the man who proved him right." She stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in, Victor. Let me teach you what he taught me." And Victor Callahan, who had once been the most feared man in New York, who had held a gun to a cryptographer's head and ordered a vault burned and inherited an empire of blood, walked into a small London workshop and learned from the maid who had beaten his impossible vault how to mend the broken things that people loved. He was not a natural. His hands were too used to holding weapons, and it took him a long time to learn the patience a clock demands. But he learned, and every so often, working late over some delicate mechanism, he would pause and look at Emily across the bench and shake his head in a kind of wonder that never faded. 25 experts, he would say, and a maid opened it in 1 minute. "It wasn't 1 minute," Emily would answer the way she always did. "It was my whole life." "I know," Victor would say. "That's what I mean." And in the window of that workshop on a small brass stand sat the Leviathan. Emily had asked for it in the aftermath of everything, and to her surprise, they had let her have it, this monstrous, beautiful machine of gears and stars and organ pipes that had once guarded a criminal empire and had frightened the smartest people in the world. She had restored it herself lovingly, every ring and every pipe, and now it did not guard anything at all. It simply kept time, perfect time. The most beautiful clock in London, sitting in the window of a small workshop, ticking softly its constellation ring, still offset by exactly 3 degrees, her father's signature hidden in plain sight where only the two of them would ever know to look. Sometimes late in the evening when the work was done, Emily would stand in front of it and close her eyes and listen to it tick the same soft rhythm she had first heard in a criminal's bunker with 60 seconds left on the clock and everything to lose. And she would hear her father in it the way she always had, the way she always would, because he had built himself into it the same way he had built himself into her, and neither the machine nor the daughter would ever stop carrying him. And on the quietest nights, if she listened closely, she could almost hear him say it again, the way he had on the last night before he was taken, and the first night after he came home, and every day in between, that she had carried his voice inside her. Find the stars, Emily. Find your way home. She had found them. She had found him, and she had built a home at last out of broken clocks and second chances, and a love that no vault on earth could ever hold, and no monster could ever steal, and no amount of time could ever take away. The maid who solved the impossible in 1 minute lived a long and quiet and extraordinary life, and she never once told the world her secret, because the secret was never a trick, and it was never genius, and it was never luck. The secret was simply this: she had been loved so completely by a father who refused to give up, and she had loved him back so fiercely across 8 years of darkness that when the moment came, that love was stronger than any lock ever built by human hands. And it always would be. And that, in the end, is the only thing that ever truly opens what cannot be opened. That is the whole story, and every word of it is true.